I'd like to welcome you all to the Community Development Standing Committee meeting of October 2nd, and acknowledge that we are meeting today in the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. We have an amended agenda in front of us with the addition of the development program. Moved by Mayor Heintzman, seconded by Councillor Pryor. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. So we will go. Oh no, we have minutes to adopt. Somebody moved the minutes be adopted. Moved by Councillor Pryor, seconded by Mayor Heintzman. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Any business arising from those minutes? Seeing none. Sorry?
Yes.
Councillor Elliott.
I want to find it. Hold on a second. There was a question in the minutes. Under the revitalization tax exemption bylaw, it said the downtown RT bylaw has been inactive since 2017. And then underneath it says, there's a bullet point that says 5 applications were received and approved over 4 years. And somewhere in that conversation, I thought we also talked about the business park. And I wasn't sure if that bullet point was related to downtown or business park.
Or both.
Or both.
Yes, that bylaw that's inactive, that was enacted in 2017 was actually downtown and business park. Downtown and business park, yeah.
There's one bylaw for the two areas?
Yeah.
Yes,
And the oceanfront bylaw is separate.
correct.
So do we need to amend that? Or?
We need to approve the minutes as amended.
Yeah.
That's correct.
We'll just clarify that that applies to both areas in the minutes. Move to approve as directed. Councillor Elliott, second. Councillor Pryor. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
So move to the first item on business development project update. Delicious.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Jan Solishki, Director of Planning. In front of you today is a late distribution item, which is the list of active development projects. On the first page, you'll see a number of projects. There's 12 applications, but it's actually about 6 projects. Half of these applications are for the same type of variance at Sky Ridge. That's why the list looks quite long. Also I'll note that the priority projects are highlighted in blue. So yeah, we don't have anything to bring to council's attention. However, if council has any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Okay, so first I'll note that Councillor Elliott has told me that she will be recusing herself if there's any discussion on one of the Sky Ridge issues. So you can just give us a heads up if that's what you intend to talk about. Beyond that, Councillor Pryor, Mayor Heintzman, Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thanks. Just the first one on the list there, Mamcom Adventures in temporary use permit would allow, so it's just ship containers connected with posts and beams and roofs, which would include cafes and retailers. So is this on the Mamcom Blind Channel Waterfront Park property?
No, it's not. I believe this is associated with the Malcolm River. There's a proposal to put in a sort of tourist commercial operation in and around where the powerhouse is.
Power plant, the Atlantic.
So past Valley Cliff up. We can actually zoom in on the map there.
It's where the IPP is, Canadian Power, whatever.
Oh, I know this
So
one.
this is
Yeah.
the area,
Yeah,
the general.
He's
yeah.
going to talk to us.
Yeah, I know this guy. Yeah, that's good. I'm glad to see that come through.
This is we're expecting a rezoning application associated with this proposal as well. The applicant has decided to go with a temporary use permit first, but we've just received it, so it hasn't been done. A lot of assessment hasn't been done yet.
Mayor Heintzman.
Yeah, I did want to ask you a quick question about Sky Ridge.
Where I'll accuse myself, I did some work for the proponent earlier this spring, and you know I don't have an ongoing financial conflict. I think there's a perception bias.
So is this one applicant that owns a whole bunch of lots? Is that how it is? That haven't been developed yet, or
No, so it's individuals owning separate lots. And I believe it's the overall developer for Skyridge that's made the application on behalf of the lot owners.
Right.
None of them have been built yet, I don't believe. And they're all asking for the same thing. It's to move the buildings closer to the street because the drop off. It'll essentially mean less retention at the rear of the property if the buildings are pushed forward.
Does staff see any problematic aspect of this based on the subdivision plan that we're all of a sudden seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 variances? Like, is the subdivision plan flawed in some way? No offense.
I'm not, again, these are new applications, so it's hard to say exactly what our recommendation will be. There is some rationale to push those building envelopes forward, so we wouldn't be recommending if the request was to just expand the area, but it's actually to push the envelope forward. I think it depends on the form and character of the back of those properties and how it's going to look. So we've asked the applicant, or we've notified the applicant that the form and character at the back of the property will be a significant
And
determinant.
it's standard for all of them, so it would be essentially the whole street would be setting this tone, or?
It's that section particularly, let's see if we can find it. It's not an issue on other lots, it's this one,
Oh, that's
The lots
university.
above that
Yeah.
retaining wall.
yeah. So I believe it's this area here.
Over there.
Is there, with all these variances, is there an opportunity to fix some of the problems with regard to that pump house and stuff? Create that expectation with the person asking for these variances?
Yeah, they're totally discretion upon council, so I think we can look at
Might be something
the area
staff thinks
beyond
about.
beyond the specific lots.
Yeah, staff can keep that in mind as they discuss that with the
Absolutely.
opponents.
I have Councillor Chappelle and Councillor Pryor, but are we going to change subjects? I'd like to get all the discussion on
No.
Skyridge. You want to-
It's
Skyridge?
about Skyridge and it's about conflict of interest. I find it odd that Councillor Elliott has recused herself because she put forward zoning in that area for her daycare, for the daycare zoning for the school up there that is her kid's private school as
Yeah,
well.
that's not the topic for me. So, and you don't know about the timing, so
I do know about the timing.
Councillor
It
Elliott?
was a conflict of interest.
Councillor Pryor, I beg your pardon.
You know, these lots are all kind of a bonus since they put that big retaining wall in. And we didn't have any steep slope regulations before that retaining wall went in, but I assume when they say they want to reduce the setbacks, that's to the view side, not to the road side.
It's the front yard setback, so it's to move the buildings closer to the road.
Away from
Or close to the road, so.
Yeah, away from the slope.
So then 15-foot setback, you're not getting your car on your property. Right?
No, that would be enough for a parking stall. It's not 5.4 meters.
It says 50 feet.
16, 17 feet.
Yeah, which is about 15.
You get your
feet.
little car in there, but you're not gonna get your four-door pickup. You don't park
Right.
across the sidewalk.
So the properties will still have to address, like, they'll have to meet the parking requirements.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my only concern, I mean, with that huge front.
That is a strata road, not a public road, so not that that makes a huge
Oh,
difference,
that's
but
right,
it's a
it's a
strata
strata.
road. So.
Is there a question from the audience?
Oh, no, I was just gonna ask about the.
No, let's to go to the microphone or come up to the table.
Oh, no.
Okay. Anything further on Skyridge? I just want to compartmentalize for Councillor Elliott. Okay. Somebody get Councillor Elliott, please. So further discussion about the project? Councillor Crowe?
Well, I don't know if this is appropriate to talk about the mud zone in this time. Anybody?
That's the question we'll find out.
Well, I'm concerned with one of the guys that's planning the development on the corner. His flood flow elevation is 6 feet higher than the neighbor. So his kind of vision, or what I thought our vision was to see whatever happened in the mud zone be pedestrian friendly. So one guy's 6 feet, the other guy's 0. That's not pedestrian friendly. So you're trying to share parking amongst the two and let the people walk amongst the two. And one guy said, how can he do that without, with 6 feet of stairs, what a wheelchair is going to do? You can't design your parking to fit across property lines and help both developments. I just thought it was our vision to see that more pedestrian connected. And from the looks of the one guy's plans, he's trying to do that. But if we push him up 6 feet, that puts all his parking under the building and then all his commercials on the second floor. And the rest of the business park, if you go down Queensway, it's all road. You drive your car, you park in the building, you walk into the store. Well, his is going to be up. Anyway, I said I'd ask the questions and see what we thought. And I know engineering goes, no, you're 6 feet, but I didn't know what planning had to say.
Are you able to respond to that today?
Not really, because we don't even have an application on that property.
Somebody does, it's in engineering.
Well, I think there's been discussions on this property about the flood construction level, and I
Yeah,
think the owner was seeking an exemption to the flood construction level.
Well, the one on the left-hand side there has an exemption.
Yes, and there was really good rationale for it. Our floodway goes through this property.
Yeah.
And so-
I understand it comes right down the road and goes through there.
Yes.
I just don't understand why we keep the guy beside him up 6 feet.
So there's a number of ways you can reach the flood construction level, either by grade, by construction, or using both. So I'm not sure how much the owner has explored all of the options available. The planning process in this area is somewhat driven by our floodways. And so, like I said, there is an exemption here that it hasn't come to council yet, the development permit for that project. But there was really good rationale.
Why? If the road is our flood flow, it's going to come right over that road and go through that piece. I understand that.
Well, the floodway actually goes through here as well.
There's one there too.
Yeah,
But the other road's coming through Government Road.
yes.
You'll see it come straight through there. I just don't understand why we push that one up 6 feet. I don't understand that.
Because that's, the flood control bylaw says that we should elevate to the flood control level. We've granted, or proposing to grant an exemption in one case, in the other cases we haven't granted the exemption. It'll be at the same elevation as the stuff across the street, the stuff that's further west in the mud zone.
It's the same elevation as the rest of the business park? No, I don't think so.
Yeah, the rest of the business park is elevated.
6 feet above the road.
Not sure exactly what the standard is.
There's a reasonable amount of fill on that site because it's lower than the road. So yes, it will have to come up quite a bit above existing grade, but no more than the storage building that's kitty corner, no more than one of the other mud buildings that I believe have already approved.
Mayor Heintzman?
Yeah, on that, and then I have one other thing. This is, I think when we developed this mud zone, we knew we'd have to revisit it to see if it was sort of achieving what council and we envisioned in terms of being a transition from the residential to the industrial. And we've had one DP so far on that. We have another one tonight. What I'm seeing so far and what I'm hearing about what other landowners are proposing does make me concerned along the lines of what Councillor Pryor's saying, in terms of how the floodway is impacting what the vision of this place would be, how each property integrates with one another. For example, because of the floodway issues, we can't get from one of the small lots over to one of the big lots because you have to go up and then you have all your retail there. And then you basically have to go down the stairs again. You can't even just walk across to get to the other retail. I mean, it was intended to be quite a homogeneous, integrated zone, and it's turning into a hodgepodge. And I don't think we really thought about what how these floodways, I mean, it's all relatively new for us, but how these floodways are to actually impact the built environment on these sites. What I'm seeing so far, I don't think it's going to work. And if we give one guy the ability to not do it, and then everybody else is built up here. I think there's some fairness issues, but at the same time, I understand why we need low points and high points. But I have a feeling this sort of whole mud zone needs to have another group think about what are the intentions there, what are our options, and how do we make sure this isn't going to be a mishmash of high, low, gaps between buildings, unaccessible. You're going to have to build massive ramps everywhere because people can't get from A to B if you're, have a wheelchair or challenged mobility-wise. I'm really worried about this piece. It seems engineering is over here, our sort of concept and planning principles are over here, and we haven't figured out how to actually integrate these properly. At least that's what I'm seeing so far. It's hard because they're coming in piecemeal one at a time, but I'm not sure we've had the comprehensive think about how we make sure this is actually achieving our goals. And I don't think we're going to solve it in this meeting, but and we may not solve it by the end of this term, but I think it's something we need to get in front of. I mean, we have another DP tonight, and beside that other DP, there's no integration of those sites now. They're like these isolated islands in a floodplain. Anyway, I had my little spiel there. I'm just wondering maybe staff can help me figure out how we deal with this problem.
No. Council, did you want to respond, or do you want to wait until the other comments? Go to Councillor Lillooet.
Sure.
I
do
was
have
going to
other-
ask about a different.
I have
Different subject?
I have a different topic too.
Go ahead.
So certainly when we did the mud zone, we did it fairly quickly because we were responding to, the potential development of single-family and duplex homes in that area. And I will agree that, the floodplain restrictions were not as clear at that point. We were at the same time going through the floodplain management bylaw, the creation of it, and the integrated flood hazard management plan. And the floodways were not as clear as they are today, and the impact of floodways was not as clear for sure. And so I think that would warrant another revisit of the area.
But even if we ensured that all these property at least connected at the same level, that would be helpful. Instead of, there's a setback and a gap, and then, like, if they're going to build here, build it up to there so these guys can build here, and you can have actually a plaza directly connecting the two instead of having to go down the stairs, back up the stairs, or down the ramp, and it becomes more of a bridge, and you still have your floodway underneath, but somehow really thinking about how these are integrated with each other. Otherwise, I just see this a bit of a failed experiment if we don't figure that out.
On this subject, Councillor Swell.
Thank you. And I share the same concerns, and actually, Mayor Heintzman just brought up what I was thinking as a solution is having an underground floodway with the parking underground with everything at level. But I also wonder, our downtown flood construction level, we allow commercial at grade and then apartments up above, which actually addresses the fact that you have living space up above, which is addressing flood construction level, but commercial is exempt from that. So I'm not sure why we need to build everything up in the flood construction level in a mud zone. And maybe we actually make mud exempt from flood construction level, which actually for the neighborhood and for the train tracks and everything that surrounds it doesn't cause drainage into these other areas and allows commercial at grade, which for accessibility issues as well, and maybe allows 2 floors of commercial or more innovation to happen in the mud zone. So looking at what our flood construction relaxation is for the downtown and then adding it to the mud zone, that's just something that definitely warrants discussion. And I agree that it needs another rethink.
On this topic?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And so what bothers me a little bit about us, this council leaving it, is I'm afraid that, the people that own those lands are gonna keep wanting to bring development forward, and there's gonna be a new bunch of people sitting around here, and they've got a big task ahead of them, understanding everything, and I feel like we shouldn't leave this hang. I don't think we should leave this hang, because it might take a long while for the next batch to get to what we've studied, and we created this zone, and we've all talked about it over a 2-3 year period, and to just at the 98% of the way along bail and leave it for a new group is, I think, unfair to anyone trying to get something done there. So, downtown, like Susan says, everybody's the same down here. If the guy on the corner has to come up to the same height as the big storage building across the street, that's about 3 feet above the center of the road, not 6 feet above the center of the road. And so the flood flow path through that property has to be at least the same height as the road. It can't be below it or above it. So pushing him 6 feet above the flood flow is pushing him 6 feet above the road. And the mini storage across the street is maybe 3 feet. Well, I think we're just missing. I'd love to see it resolved before we're gone.
Well, I don't think we're going to solve it here, as the mayor states. So I think this is something to come back to committee of the whole meeting, probably another agenda.
I'll chat it over with you.
We don't have control over that, and we'll leave it to staff timing and our schedule to bring it back. Excuse me, on this topic?
Yep,
Okay.
just on bringing it
Last
back.
comment, yeah.
Yep, thank you. Do you think that the next council isn't going to be smart? We're electing a democratic new council, and we don't have to push everything through before the new council. This new council is going to be smart enough to be able to figure out flood construction level. I totally trust our democratic process in that, and to think that everything has to be on an agenda before we leave is not possible for us. We're not even going to be able to keep up with that.
Yeah, and I think that applies to a lot of things.
We
but I
will
think
make the agendas unreasonable.
This is one of the things, I think, that because there's development interest there, and development in process, or plans in process, we want to resolve this as soon as possible. So I'll leave it to staff to deal with that. We had Councillor Elliott on a different topic, and on a different topic.
So 2 questions. The Uptown at Garibaldi, is that right near the fire hall? And the Hunter Place, what are those lands designated as in the employment land strategy?
On the second question, and the employment land strategy, I can't answer off the top of my head. It's a new application.
And would they consider more of a mud zoning rather than a comprehensive development zone? I mean, they're trying to put a pretty intensive use there, but that currently is being used for employment.
That's what we've been advising the applicants to do, is look at the mud zone rather than, a downtown zone.
Yeah.
The mud zone actually won't achieve employment in that area. We need to actually keep it as downtown commercial, but ensure we have second floor employment. Right now, we have ground floor employment all the way along there, and if we actually got ground floor and second floor employment and some density, that would achieve our goals far better than what the mud zone is getting us.
That's exactly what we're going for.
Thank you.
Both of these strike me as being the type that we would want, council would want to have a look at before we get into the bylaw stage.
Yeah.
Because they both raise a bunch of different issues, and
Yes.
they're quite significant developments.
Even sorry, may I follow up? Maybe even looking at one comprehensive building and then density, like trading a multi-floor comprehensive building so that we maintain business taxes instead of putting all our employment underneath residential, which has driven business taxes. So shifting our employment to a single building and then leaving our residences on the other side. I think that we have an opportunity here to maintain some good employment, but also keep the tax rates separate from residential.
Anything further on this topic? Oh, sorry, Mary.
I'll just quickly comment on this, and I got one other question. This one too, I think there's lots of opportunity to look at realigning roads and a whole bunch of different things, so I know
Yes.
that's on your radar.
Yeah, that's why I think we need a look.
Yeah. You've got a DP and a TUP for carbon engineering in 2 spots with 2 different codes. Are there 2 different applications?
So there's the new,
There's 2018-44 and 2018-63, and I'm just curious if they're different.
so one is a temporary use permit, and
And
the
what
other
is
one
the-
is a development permit.
Oh, okay, so it's the same
It's the same application, but it needs
applications.
both.
Okay, I
Yeah.
was just wondering why there was 2 different codes, okay. Okay, thank you.
Anything further on this?
Well, I'm just wondering about the big one on Buckley Avenue in Cleveland. Is everything going okay at that one?
The Jumar project?
Yeah.
Yes, I think they've got their site operation permit. And so all the work that you're seeing there is preparation work for the
Is it
building.
okay to pour the concrete? Is that far along?
Nope, they don't have the building permit yet, they don't.
So is that a problem?
No.
No problem?
I believe one of the conditions now for the building permit is to get to the bottom of the servicing agreement, to get a servicing agreement in place, and then we'd be in a position to issue the building permit. So we're still dealing with, the detailed design of street frontages and things that would go in the servicing agreement.
Someone said that if you don't get your building permit to do the foundation and keep the crews going, you have a chance you might lose your permit.
Yeah, we've done it in the past, we've issued a foundation permit just to help
Yeah.
keep things moving along as certain details get worked out, so hopefully that's part of the consideration of this project here. The only other thing I want to say about this project is, I know we don't control all the timelines on this, proponents have to make sure they're doing all their due diligence as well. I know just because this is close to the school, we all want to see this not get stalled out and hit sort of 3 seasons of schooling to make this project happen, so I know we don't control everything, but maybe staff just keeps that in mind, is that, it's not like prioritizing this project, but it would be great if it doesn't impact a 3rd school year.
Absolutely. And the foundation permit is a common practice that we do allow.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, seeing nothing more, thank you, Mr. Melanish.
Thank you.
And we'll go to 4.2, Brennan Park and Recreation Center Public Engagement. Mr. Hoskin.
Thank you, Chair.
Now that you introduce your guest.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Chair and Committee. My name is Tim Hoskin, Director of Recreation Services. Here to speak with you today and to share what has been learned from our community engagement around Brennan Park. I'd like to introduce our project team. From staff, we have Robin Arthurs, Natasha Golbeck, Camilla Say, Neil Plum, Elaine Naseby, and Christina Moore. And to my right is Sarah Gillett from Modus, who was contracted to provide support and leadership around community engagement. A little bit of background. I've shared with Chair and Committee a one-pager just on the growth that we've seen from our recent benchmarking at the Recreation Center, and it's pretty staggering. I won't go into detail, but please, at your leisure, please review. I do have a few extra copies if members of the audience are interested.
Can I ask you a question about that very first one? Sure. It's astounding that we're up at 500,000. I think at the beginning of this term, we kind of challenged staff to drive more usership of it.
Yeah.
We were successful. You guys were successful. What were the numbers 3 years ago? It was more like 160 or something like that, was it not? I have that in my head, but.
we had a very large jump in growth around 2013 when a lot of the changes that were implemented started to take effect around programs. And unfortunately, before then, it's really anecdotal. We didn't have counters in place. There were various measurements from, and I've heard from 100,000 to potentially 200,000. Certainly, it was we know from being there, and I'm sure staff in the community know from being there, that it is gone from being, I believe in 2012 there was an article in the Chief called the Ghost Town of Brennan Park, and I don't think that is the case at all anymore. So it is pretty outstanding, and kudos to the recreation team. They've done a fantastic job and have been challenged and pushed, and they've done some pretty cool things. Just some background around, we'll get into some background around the project steps to date, and then I will hand over the presentation to Sarah to share some of the findings and how we move forward. Certainly we were here, I believe it was July 24th, when we were able to share the bulk of the information, the themes that were emerging, and we have a little more detail today, and a little more research on suggestions on how to move forward. So some background: Recreation Center requires replacement or significant upgrades and expansion, and the Brennan Park fields and lands require some clear direction and some long-term decision making as we get busier and busier. This is the motion that Council endorsed in February 20th, 2018, given direction to staff to accept our decision statement and our scope of engagement and level of engagement with the community surrounding Brennan Park and the Recreation Center, and then some addition of some bullet points that Council also wanted to add to the engagement. So I will hand it over now to Sarah.
Great, thanks Tim. So hi everyone, my name is Sarah Gillett. I'm the engagement lead at Modus Planning, Design and Engagement, and I've been invited to present the final results of the Brennan Park Engagement Summary Report. So as Tim mentioned, this was a two-part process. One focused specifically on the Brennan Park Recreation Center renovation, expansion or replacement, and a parallel process surrounding Brennan Park fields and lands. So before we dive in, I just wanted to start by referring back to the purpose of this engagement, and this purpose was really driven by that motion and that Tim just referred to, as well as the communications and engagement strategy that was developed with staff. And it was really the process was really designed to involve community members in identifying public values and priorities to guide decision-making about Brennan Park Recreation Center and the surrounding fields and lands. So for the Brennan Park Recreation Center specifically, it was an opportunity to check in on some of the priorities identified in the 2012 Parks and Rec Master Plan that were behind some of the layout plans and phasing that community members got to respond to. And then for Brennan Park Fields and Lands, it's sort of taking it a step back, more at the vision and goals level, to involve members in really identifying what those visions and goals should be. So some of the desired outcomes of this process would be that there's raised awareness of this planning process, not only for the Brennan Park Rec Center, Fields and Lands, and also the upcoming real estate strategy. We wanted to understand preferences around the three proposed options, as well as on project phasing for the Recreation Center. And we wanted ideas around a vision and a set of values for Brennan Park Fields and Lands. So ultimately, having an understanding of these public values and priorities to be able to guide decision-making about the Rec Center and surrounding fields and lands going forward. So just quickly, I think it's important to note how this was framed in terms of how the public were introduced to this process. So, their involvement is situated within a longer process that, started with the report to committee with concept plans were presented based on community input from 2012, 2013. moving on to the decision of this two-pronged engagement approach, and then the online questionnaire, the events, and presentation to council. And as well, this effort was framed within the context of the broader facility upgrade and replacement needs. So this diagram, as well as the previous one, were part of the welcoming materials that community members would have had when they participated in the event. So really describing this as a step in a longer process and outline the next steps, which include the real estate and facilities master plan, applications for grant funding and corporate sponsorship, a Brennan Park master plan, and specifying that financial impacts of the community be brought back for discussion prior to any investment decision. So with that framing in mind, the key questions for Brennan Park Recreation Center. First, how would you rate your support for an increase in investment in Squamish recreation facilities? Again, keeping that larger facilities and investment needs in mind. 2, which options do you prefer? So they were presented 3 options, 2 renovate, expand options, which, as Tim suggested, were driven by some of the input that was gathered in the Parks and Rec master plan, and 1 replace option. The expand and renovate options had different colors to show the phases that this project would roll out in. And all 3 options included sort of a list of features and considerations and a cost to provide that cost comparison. For the third question, really asked people to consider if we were to expand and upgrade, how would you prioritize the phasing? And this last question, whether it was replace or expand, renovate, what's missing? What's in what you've seen presented? What is missing from these options that still needs to be addressed? And for Brennan Parks, Fields and Lands, the questions were much more high level. What values should guide decision making? What kind of activities do you think should happen here, and how would you prioritize them? And what is your vision for the future of Brennan Park, Fields and Lands? So all that was a bit of review, and last time I came I did a really detailed what we did and who participated, so I'm not going to go through all of that again, but I did, that's all in this handout, so feel free to refer to this. This is the statistics of who responded to the survey, what demographics responded to the survey, and it also outlines the activities that we did and the promotions, the avenues that we used to promote the event. Ultimately, we were driving everybody to an online survey and an in-person event. So just a quick snapshot before I dive into the results. These results come from this online survey and the in-person events. So the online survey, 1,032 community members fully completed the survey, so beginning to end. So that's about 5% of Squamish's population. On top of those 1,032, there were 869 partially completed surveys. So that's people that started the survey but who did not complete. Their answers were included in this analysis, which brings us to about 4,004 comments. And then about 150 participants came to see us in person. The in-person event repeated the same questions, so people weighed in on the same questions, and that generated about 723 comments. There was a question last time about the abandon rate. Is 869 a reasonable amount of participants to drop a survey? So that is in line with what we've seen with other surveys. It is expected that for an online survey, a certain number of people open the survey, look at the first couple of pages, and then drop off before completing the survey. And we have data that shows just that. Most people that dropped the survey did within the first few slides. And we have a detailed analysis of that staff have if you want to look further at those numbers. So, what did all that data tell us? So the rest of my presentation will focus on what we've learned. So ultimately on the funding question, the community results demonstrate an appetite for increased investment in Squamish recreational facilities. So as well as tell us whether they supported or opposed an increase in recreation funding, they also had a chance to tell us why they chose the reason that they did. And these are some kind of the high-level themes that came out of those answers. People feel strongly that there is a need to respond to and prepare for Squamish's rapidly growing population, address aging or inadequate infrastructure. And people really emphasize the important role they see Brennan Park playing in the community as a central hub, but also to really push the values of healthy living, active lifestyle. Having said that, people are also really value responsible government spending, and there are a lot of comments had to do with investment in recreation really needs to match Squamish's ability to pay for amenities. And while lots of people had suggestions of where this increased investment should come from, I'd say the most common thought is that there were reservations about increasing property taxes. So next, on the options. So the community engagement results showed a preference for an upgrade / renovation of the Brennan Park Recreation Center, as opposed to a rebuild. People had an opportunity to tell us why they chose the option that they did. The most common themes were this idea of making use of existing facilities, so making use of things that are still working well. When they chose one reason over another, some of the impacts that people were worried about were impacts on parking, impacts on green space, and impacts on service. They wanted to minimize disruption of service. Cost, I think, was a driving factor in the options that people chose. And different people would have seen option 1 or 2 or 3 as being more cost effective. And then there was this comment of, it's important to pick a good something that's going to be a good investment over time, thinking long term. In terms of phasing, unfortunately the community was divided. There's no clear direction from the community on this point. About as many people picked, for example, the pool to be the first phase as the number of people who picked the pool to be the 4th phase. And the arena has similar results. So we'll have to leave it to further technical, financial analysis or further community engagement to answer that question. On this question, we were curious to see if we looked at the results for different demographics, if there would be a difference. So there were some small differences, which are interesting, although still doesn't give clear direction. So for respondents under 19, they were more likely to pick the ice sheet as number 1. However, the respondents between 20 and 29 ranked the ice sheet as the 4th priority most often. And then for respondents over 60, they were less likely to choose the 8-lane pool as a first priority. So for what's missing, so this is whether we renovate, replace, what do not see here. And some of the ideas were for new sports facilities, such as like a multi-use track, new courts and fields, water park. It's important to note that that would actually be more the parks and lands as opposed to the recreation center, but this is the things that people came up with. A lot of people says we need to focus on upgrading existing facilities rather than adding new. So upgraded change rooms, pool, upgraded gym and fitness facilities. A lot of ideas had to do with gathering spaces, seating areas, coffee shops, meeting rooms, and overall there was this theme that it was important to have inclusive, accessible, and user-friendly spaces that meet the needs of diverse community members. And about 15% took the time to say, yep, you've got the right mix. So for fields and lands, so consider this sort of a draft vision statement, if you will, that kind of combines some of the themes that came out of the graffiti wall that people worked on at the community event, as well as some of the themes that came out of community mapping. Ultimately, the community's vision for the Brennan Park Fields and Lands is for a welcoming and inclusive multi-use gathering place that brings the community together, promotes active and healthy living, and is a fun, safe, and playful hub for Squamish. When we ask people to rank what values should guide future decisions about Brennan Park's fields and lands, affordable programs and services, inclusion and accessibility, PowerPoint's gonna kill us.
I had a dime for
It's
every
all
song.
right. I've got a paper copy. It's gonna be okay.
It's a feature.
That's right. Keep us on our toes. Yes, ultimately there, I think it's slide 21. Yep. If you see the kind of the values that people ranked closer to the top, they really confirm some of the values that are in the vision statement, which really prioritize welcoming, inclusive spaces that promote healthy living. that one, and yeah, perfect. Community members were asked to rank sort of a number of what we called activity hubs to kind of let us know what activities they thought were most they most valued in Brennan Park. And really community members placed the most value on areas for play, events, and recreation. And overall these results are consistent with the themes and values identified in the previous activities. You know, that the community-focused recreational and community event functions of Brennan Park are most valued by residents, with less value placed on campground facilities, commercial uses, and off-leash dog area. Mapping. This was an exercise at the open house where community members were allowed to tell us, like, what's working for you now? What do you like about Brennan Park Fields and Lands now? What would you like to see in the future? And from this activity, it was amazing to see the diversity of programming that people valued in Brennan Park Fields and Lands, and that was quite valued, as well as the central location as a community hub, this idea of this is a hub for this community. And it's interesting to note too that people really value the program spaces, but they also really value the scenery, the green space, and natural places to play that are currently there. In terms of ideas of what to do with Brennan Park in the future, tons of new ideas for new facilities, water park, very common, turf field, running track, tennis courts, new baseball diamonds, as well as some ideas for improving current facilities such as playground, bike skills, skateboard park, and also this theme of community amenities, so food options, space to hold festivals and events. So overall, a really high-level summary of what did we take away from all this. Community members value the important role that Brennan Park plays in their lives and support an increase in recreation funding to address growing population, aging infrastructure, and really to maintain Brennan Park as that central hub. Community members value responsible spending and would like to make efficient use of existing facilities, minimize impacts on parking and green space, and minimize disruption to service. And there's no clear direction as to which phase of the upgrade should be prioritized first. Everything is important. In terms of the fields and lands, future decisions should be guided by the community's vision for a welcoming, inclusive, multi-use gathering place that brings the community together, promotes active and healthy living that is fun, safe, and a playful hub for Squamish. Decisions should be guided by priority values of affordable programs and services, inclusion and accessibility, healthy communities and individuals, and shared use of facilities. And community members place the most value on areas for play, such as playgrounds, spray park, events such as water sports, concerts, festivals, sporting events, and recreation. So ultimately, I feel like we have some valuable information here that could help the city when evaluating future opportunities relating to Brennan Park Fields and Lands. And with that, I will pass it on to Tim to talk about next steps.
Let me just stop you there and just see if there's any questions or comments from council. We'll break this up a little bit. See if there's any questions on what we've just heard or comments. Councillor Elliott, Mayor Heintzman.
The concept of a track was mentioned a few times, and I'm wondering if that meant both an indoor track, walking, and as well as an outdoor, like track and field track.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I could go back into the reports to see if, like, which proportion was an indoor versus outdoor. My sense off the top of my head is mostly an outdoor track, but I'm definitely.
I'm curious because up in Dawson Creek where we were, they have a walking track around their ice rinks.
Right.
So that in the winter, people have a place to walk.
That's indoors. Yeah.
So I'm curious about that.
It's a great question.
Did you want to respond to that?
I'll just add to that. One of my stations for the community engagement, I was on, dealing with the end side, and I certainly heard similar responses. Can we tie in a track around the rink or around a gymnasium, especially for seniors, as a place when it's rainy or wet that people can get some exercise and stay mobile. Not to take away, because I've also heard over the years that an outdoor one is important.
Okay. Thank you.
Mayor Heintzman, Councillor Stroh.
Just a clarification question, and then I think I'll wait for the end there. In the responses, it seems like the survey responses quite a good number,
Mhm.
all things considered.
Yeah,
Participation, in-person participation, I think a little lower than I think we wanted.
yeah.
Is that, am I making that assumption, is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's, it was lower than we would have wanted. It was a beautiful sunny day. I'm sure that
Unlike
active
today.
Squamish, active Squamish, if I was an active Squamish person, I would not have come indoors that day. But I think it is also common to see that you get higher numbers online than at in-person events.
But you think enough participation that gives a good foundation to then, obviously, I think some pieces we're going to want to drill a little bit more detail into.
Exactly.
And
For sure.
lays a pretty good foundation.
Exactly, and I'd say that the fact, especially because the questions were the same at both events, we didn't lose anything by having less people. We had, having a healthy amount of response rate to the survey, given that it was the same set of questions, can give us some confidence that we got a good, diverse set of input there, yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Schwab.
Thank you for the information, great high-level information. I'm wondering if staff, and this may be after you've done the next presentation, but I'm wondering if staff can address the fact that this land is a floodway and just the land use in the area. We don't own the land, it's a Crown grant. So what's possible as far as upgrades? We're looking at this in isolation outside of other real estate strategy. I think Robin's probably the best person to address that question, is speaking to the Crown grant, and if the floodway and the flood hazard management area continues to be down that area, or if it's been relocated since we've added density to the area.
Go ahead.
Chair. So Mr. Plum did meet with the Crown, with the Lands Branch down in Surrey since our last meeting. I can't speak to the floodway part of it because that's a different issue, but he did speak to the Crown grant, and there are different people now on file. So right now the free Crown grant itself says recreation use, plain and simple, and public use. They did say that they're willing to revisit commercial use that is focused on recreation. So specifically, of course, the discussion was around the soccer dome and whether or not we could partner on Brennan Park to do a lease, a commercial lease, which is a form of disposition. And they said they would look at it. They were open to looking at it. So they didn't say, yes, we can move forward. But it wasn't no, like it has been in the past. In the past, it's been a hard no. And now they're open to having discussion, expanding what the types of recreation use are. But I can't speak to the integrated flood hazard management plan because that's a different thing altogether, and that's about public safety.
Okay. Can I just follow up with one more question? So thank you, that's exactly the information I was looking for as well. I'm wondering about partnerships with the school board. It's for recreation, but it's for children and for growing. But if addressing partnerships with the school board is a possibility, because disposition of different lands and the ability to pay for it will be an immense issue for our community.
Well, is that the next steps part? Because we're talking about the engagement part right now. So I just want to confine the questions to that. We'll come back to that, hold that thought. Mayor Heintzman on this point?
Yeah, I just want to get something clarified. We own the lands,
It came to us as a free Crown grant.
but we own the lands,
Yeah.
It's got a reverter on it.
exactly, but we own the lands.
We own the land's correct.
And we have to use it for X purposes.
That's right.
And if we don't, it reverts or we get permission. I just want to clarify, we do own the lands.
Oh, and any profit that's made off the lands currently, any commercial profit goes to the grant, doesn't come to us.
Yeah, I was going to make that point too. A Crown grant actually is a transfer of ownership.
Yep.
But it's like owning your house with conditions on it, so we just have to deal with the conditions. I did have a question though, and maybe it's just because I went through an all candidates meeting last night and the topic came up a couple of times, but was there any consideration or feedback about using it for things such as arts facilities or not strictly sport recreation, but kind of associated with that? Did we get into any sort of these types of areas?
Yeah, there were some arts uses that were suggested for this. I know also in our pre-engagement interview, so we interviewed a number of stakeholders directly related to Brennan Park Recreation Center and lands, and I recall that there is the sentiment of like the arts community would like to have some arts uses in Brennan Park, but they wouldn't want that to replace arts facilities in other places necessarily. So that's I guess just one caution. So I would say yes, there's artistic uses of Brennan Park. There's an interest in having artistic programming there, but they wouldn't want that to replace arts facilities for arts use.
Mr. Hoskin?
All of the options presented to the community included a wellness and arts center. So it was brought forward that arts would have a strong component in any rebuilt or replaced recreation center and what that could be from programming, from display to drama to pottery. That's being that specific, we didn't get into, but every option had the idea that arts would be a major component.
So that's considered in the pros and cons going through the survey, more or less?
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions up till now? So, carry on.
Great, thank you. Next steps, thank you, Sarah. So a real estate and facilities implementation master plan, that's a mouthful, will be developed, which will prioritize infrastructure upgrades within all district needs and recommend funding options. So as we know, this master plan will look at not just recreation facilities, but fire hall, municipal hall, and many other facilities that potentially need to be repaired, updated, or replaced, and provide council with some guidance on how do we prioritize all of this. I think it's important that we do work concurrently and not just sequentially. That we look at grant funding for an updated and expanded recreation center, and look at grants from upper levels of government, and we look at corporate sponsorship should be explored. Again, concurrently, I believe we need to look at these innovative partnerships, if it's with the school district, other schools, Vancouver Coastal Health, other like-minded partners, I think should be explored. And potentially any commercial interests, what that could look like. The Brennan Park Master Plan will be sequential, and that will address the surrounding fields and lands. This will be developed and shaped from the public engagement that we've heard to date. And this has been put in as a discussion for the 2019 budget. Financial impacts to the community, of course, will ultimately be brought back to council and to the community for any final investment decision. So what this means is we're several steps away from making any financial commitment. However, the community will have, and council will have the final say. I've highlighted here on this slide that I think it's important that, and I'll reiterate this parallel process. So we have the real estate and facilities master plan that will refine the land estimates, finalize external funding options, and do this options analysis. But in parallel that we look at sponsorship. We have a policy coming to council in October. Grants, this is one that's very exciting and a bit challenging. The province and the feds have a partnership agreement to now invest $135 million in recreation infrastructure. This was announced less than 2 weeks ago. We have a January 23rd, 2019 deadline. Exciting pieces are that a large percentage of an investment in recreation facilities could be covered, but it is a very tight timeline, and we will be getting back to council with some more information and something we need to look at pretty quickly.
Let me just stop you there. I'll go to
Sure.
Councillor Elliott, and I have a question as well, and Councillor Pryor.
No, my question was about applying under the new funding for the culture recreation grant. I wanted to make sure that,
It's aware.
yeah, we're moving forward on that. It's a great opportunity.
Councillor Pryor.
Well, same, I just hope you got all the resources you need to go for that grant.
Thank you.
My question on that, when I was reading the report, is how far or how much detail do we need for these grant applications? Do we need decisions on phasing? Do we need sort of shape of the building decisions? Do we need kind of construction drawing? Does it have to be right off the shelf before we get a grant? Could we apply for a grant today with sort of just a vague concept?
Short answer is yes. There requires
Yes, we could, right?
a fair amount
Yes to
of.
the first question. I was gonna say the final question.
Well, yes, that
All
would
of them
need
were
that amount of
contradictory.
detail. It's doable, and at least my heart says let's not leave anything on the table, and let's see what we can do. It does require a commitment from the community to invest one of these phases or all of the phases. From information gathered to date, I would think we would want to be looking at approximately a $10 million grant. They will cover more, but it does suggest that if you're looking for large amounts, they'll be valuing dispersing amongst a lot of communities, which I read that you don't want to ask for too much. But these are some of the decisions we'll need to look at together. And then we need to decide on all of the phases or one or two of the phases and move it forward. There is some grace period of about 90 days for an actual resolution from council upon the application closing, but that commitment needs to be there ultimately.
So I'll go to Councillor Chappelle in a second, but so for next steps, would we want to kind of refine our thinking and the engagement and kind of turn the engagement into something on paper to show that this is what we want to build and this might be the phasing and this is what we're applying for the grant for? Because we have several options. I don't think we've really kind of come to a design yet, or at least a conceptual design of what the people want is programming space, and so okay, this is what it might look like. What's a pool extension look like? What does another arena look like? Where does it go? What sort of thing do we have to kind of get to some of those decisions before we start applying for grants and breaking it into phases?
Yes, we need, I'm hoping it's doable. It is a big task to get there between now and January 23rd, and it requires support from staff and from council. I think the important thing is that we get back to council pretty quickly with some more information, and that the project team is able to sink their teeth into this and come back to council with the information needed to move forward and with a plan on how to move forward. From my initial look at the grant, there might be, if we're looking at phasing, I think we will have to choose one or two and to move forward. There might be some movement to be able to change that afterwards, but not guaranteed. That could be frowned upon. There is some ability to change because any project evolves and changes as it comes to breaking ground. So there, I think the province recognizes that there is some ability, but a wholesale change probably isn't doable. My suggestion is, I know I anticipated council would be excited about this and supportive. I think the next step is that we look at this as, yes, this is something we want to go after and to look at, and we come back to council with a little more detail and to look forward for a resolution of a thumbs up or thumbs down at that point.
Okay, so for questions, Councillor Chappelle, Pryor, or Heintzman.
Thank you. So, first of all, I totally agree with you, Tim, about leaving money on the table. It's not, but I also am skeptical as somebody that writes grants all the time about just putting in grants for whatever you can get just because you think you have a plan. I don't think we've fully explored the higher level and I mentioned this last time, we didn't really put out a renewal option, and working with the Crown, there are multiple ways to do partnerships, and if we could include other aspects of our community in this Crown grant and this massive piece of land that we have as an asset, that there may be other opportunities for funding, first of all, whether it be partnerships or grants or federal grants. There's a lot of different options for granting. There's always money on the table at the feds, whether it be for art facilities or renewal of our infrastructure. But people in the community that I've spoken to during the campaign have talked to me about possibly putting our fire hall there, or involving partnerships with the schools, and relocating, moving, shuffling. We're at a deficit for land everywhere in the district, and Brennan Park is an amazing opportunity to combine some of our resources. So I get that the renewal option is the fastest and quickest way to get there, but not necessarily the best way to get a long-term asset redone in our community. And without that third option of, without that proper engagement on a renewal option with looking at everything that could be on the table, I am skeptical about putting in a grant just to throw an ice rink on, or a pool, or throw something on the outside. And I worry about the central aspect of an older building and building beautiful new facilities on the guts of something that may not be sustainable. So maybe it is, and maybe our facilities manager can speak to that. That is my concern with renewal, is that we're constantly throwing money, and I talk to the facilities maintenance staff and they tell me all the stuff that's going on there, and it does make me panic about building on the guts of something that's not sustainable and not. Yeah, that is my question, is we haven't looked at renewal, we haven't looked at partnerships, we haven't got an overarching plan. We've only put forward the renewal plan really to the community, or the expansion and building on the guts. What do we do about about having this massive piece of land with extra facilities and being able to combine some of our facilities? We're looking at this in isolation of only recreation. We can work with the Crown. Maybe it's an opportunity to actually work with the Crown to change the free Crown grant into something that's a little bit more flexible for our community. We could have density there, that's an option to pay for it. We could have, there's a lot of different options.
Question.
Can you speak to any of that, the higher level?
Through the chair, I just addressing the part about the values of innovation and looking at different granting opportunities and different models vis-a-vis the grant that we're talking about that's due in January. I don't think that those things are in conflict with each other. I think that there's some calls that we can make, and council can give us some direction on, in terms of what we want to put forward for this grant here. And that certainly won't be everything, and we'll need to look at lots of different funding models, and it will be, I think, a bit of a patchwork, just because this is a really significant project. So corporate partnerships, innovation, other alternative funding models will need to be explored in addition to this grant, should we be successful in it. So just in terms of that being, those things being opposing, I'm not sure that they are. And I think that we have lots of time to dig into those details a little bit further as we move forward in parallel process with the real estate strategy, so that we can bring council a set of options around Brennan Park and see how that fits in with the rest of the facilities needs in the district.
Can I just follow up with one quick, so to be very specific, if we achieve this grant, it's not just to put facilities on the old building. It's not just an expansion grant. It's to actually look comprehensively.
This would be and jump in if I'm not right about this, Tim, but this would be a piece of what we need to do for the site as a whole. There's a lot of projects within this project, and what we'll need to do for the purposes of this grant is decide on one piece of it. So certainly, yeah.
Thank you.
Councilor Pryor, Mayor Heintzman,
Yeah, thanks.
for questions.
So how much money does the province have for this? 110 million?
$135 million. The application due date is January 23rd, 2019. If the application is more than 10% of the program, it is recommended that phasing be encouraged. It is looking for a 2-year window to be started. once the application is in place, and a 5 to 6 year completion from the application date.
Sounds just about perfect for us. All I want to make sure is there's enough resources for everybody to get something in. I think it's a priority.
Yeah, if we keep waiting for the perfect thing to fall into our lap, we'll never get anything done. I think it was very clear through the survey that 3/4 of the respondents think that the bones of what's at Brennan Park are worth keeping, worth building on. Obviously, if a structure isn't structurally sound, we're not going to build on top of it. We're going to figure out a phasing that you would build adjacent to, and if you need to decommission a piece of it, you do that. These, particularly, it's an election year federally. I think there's an opportunity for our riding. It's a swing riding. It's vulnerable. I think we have an opportunity. This is the first time we have baseline strategic planning that I think sets us up for some success in an application like this. If we had done this in previous applications, we hadn't done the homework. We hadn't done the foundational work to actually get us there. We are one of the, this is fascinating. We are literally one of the fastest growing communities in Canada. So I think that sets us up very well for this grant as well, and how we communicate that. No matter what priorities we choose, a quarter to half of the community are going to disagree with that prioritization. So at some point, this next council, when this comes back in front of them, they're going to have to make a decision. It's going to be a tough decision. Not everyone's going to be happy, but it's the first of many decisions on these types of facilities. And you got to have the balls to actually go and say, okay, let's take that next step and get it done. There's a carpe diem moment right now with our growth rate, with elections, with grant funding. Doesn't preclude us from realizing all these goals down the road, but we need to figure out. So I'm hoping staff will come back to council, the big random word council, with this is what we think we should do. We think we'll be most successful with a grant application that includes X, Y, Z for these reasons. Driven by the data that we've accumulated over the last year of doing these surveys. And be bold in our request with the federal government, because I think we're long overdue for something, for granting of this type. We have not tapped into this before because we hadn't done our homework. We've done our homework now. So I think this is a carpe diem moment, and we should giddy up. Thank you.
Councilor Pryor, and then I'll put myself in. Did you ever have it?
Yeah, I did. Oh, sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
So they say if you're applying for 10% or more of the funding, that's $14 million.
Of whose funding? Our project funding or their grant funding?
Their grant
The
funding.
program funding.
Program
So that would break down
So
to
we can apply for
13.5 million.
10%. So in other words, they're thinking there's going to be a few people who want to come in and get something done. And, like the mayor says, we've done a lot of the research. Part of the funding could be for the paperwork prior to doing the building as well.
The engineering.
Yeah, there's a lot of paperwork that has to be done. So the first phase would be complete paperwork, second phase, new ice rink, third phase, extended pool, or whatever it may be. I think it's really good. I feel lucky.
Yeah, just on Councillor Chappelle's points, as we go forward, we do have a facilities strategy. I know there was a top 5 list, there's a whole bunch of needs. But will there be consideration of whether some of those could be incorporated into Brennan Park or not? I don't want to prejudge what that might look like, but at least kind of open the mind to the possibility that it's not just what we see there today, but there might be a fire hall there, for example. And I know there's a whole bunch of considerations about locating fire halls, but just to kind of at least have a look at that potential issue. And I know there's an issue with the Crown Grant, or maybe an issue with the Crown Grant, but just the idea of what is the most efficient use of the land, whether or not you started fresh or just rebuilt the present structure, but just are there efficiencies in looking at some other uses on that site as well? Question?
Yeah, as you suggest, there are some considerations in terms of location of the fire hall in particular, but I think we will certainly look at these options, keeping in mind the community values that they share, that they want Brennan Park to be a gathering space and a place that they can come together and be sort of inclusive and accessible in all of the values that they put forward. Within those parameters, we'll certainly look at co-location options.
Carry on.
Next slide was questions, so I think we already already dove in. Here is the motion for council. You have been provided with a report from Otis and staff's recommendation that council receive this and accept this report.
Mayor Heintzman.
I will move this and add that staff prepare a grant application for whatever that federal funding is and bring it back to council for endorsement.
You second, Council? Second by Councilor Pryor. So we'll go to comment first of all. Mayor Heintzman.
No, I think we've commented this to Jeff.
Okay.
Good.
Well, I was going to say something. I'll just sort of repeat some of the comments you heard earlier, and I think when you look at a study like this, which is quite extensive, and I'm impressed by the number of responses and the depth of it, and I think the feedback to me was pretty clear. There was a vast majority in one area. I don't want to take a step back going forward. I'm prepared to look at other options and consider other things. But I think pretty clearly that the public doesn't want us to rebuild Brennan Park unless we've got good evidence that it's falling down around their ears. So I think that's certainly a direction, and I don't think we want to start questioning that direction unless some real solid evidence comes at us that we have to do something like that. So I look at this as a step forward. I know there's still options to consider as we go down the road, but I'm very much supportive of proceeding with this and looking forward to the next steps. And I think the key thing from my mind, just as I'm trying to sort of figure out how this might proceed, is sort of coming back and finalizing, or not finalizing, that's the wrong word, but presenting some kind of a concept of how we're going to go forward, a picture, you know, for council's benefit and for the public's benefit, of what this phasing might look like, what your feedback now looks like when we put it into sort of what's the structure look like, that kind of thing. So I think it may be necessary for the grant. I think it's something that we want to keep the public kind of side by side with us as we go through this process, and it's be good to have something like that. Mayor Heintzman.
Yeah, I just want to give staff and Modus kudos for the work they did. I think, again, we had great participation from the community, thoughtfulness. I'm always impressed with how our community comes out and really participates and is really thoughtful about how they contribute, which is really important in this process. Just touching on what Karen was saying about a running loop or something like that. As we start to conceptualize how to deliver some of these things that the community wants, thinking creatively about how we might get all those things by incorporating innovatively, like doing a running loop around the top of the bleachers in an arena, for example, and just being able to tie those pieces together in a cost-effective, ideally creative way, I think is really important. We did do a Parks and Rec master plan thing in 2012 or so, didn't we?
The Parks and Recreation Master.
Yeah, and that started to outline some of the partnership opportunities with school district and stuff like that. And I think, you know, there's no one solution to any of this, as I said. There's going to be lots of iterations of building on this, building on, might be sponsorship opportunities, although it was interesting, the community didn't seem all that interested in commercial sponsorship through the survey, but there may be partnership opportunities with different organizations. We've talked about partnerships with BCH, we've talked about partnerships with school district. So I really think those are big parts, and I think ultimately will help us be successful in some of these grant applications too. So finding those, you know, writing those things into the grant application I think is really important. But good job, well done. And this is, you know, I feel like all the homework we've been doing is finally starting to reap some benefits in terms of, finally, how many times have we said, let's go get a grant for this, for Brexit, and we're like, oh, we haven't done the analysis, we haven't done the homework, we haven't we haven't put in our work plan, you know, all those things we need to do to be successful in grants, and I think we're finally getting there, so hopefully we'll be successful.
Councillor Elliott, Councillor Chappell.
Just a suggestion is as staff narrows down the option of what we want to apply for, is to touch base with Squamish Nation to see how we can encourage greater participation from Squamish Nation and as a way to bring people together.
That's a great suggestion.
Councillor Chappell.
Thanks. I had one more grant question. Do we have to match the funds? Is this something that if we achieve success in the grant, is it a matching funds? Most grants require financial commitment, and we have to ensure that our budget reflects that if we receive the grant, that we can commit the funds.
Yes, good question. Most certainly it requires a commitment from community and council to a financial commitment for their share of the bill. I'm hesitant to say exactly what level of that commitment is. I put in a call and an email to the manager of this program, and potentially there could be another intake, which could, I don't think there is, he doesn't think there is, which could take some of the pressure off. But it looks like there's just the one intake. It looks like there needs to be a financial commitment. And this is very exciting. We might still get to know. I think what I'm hearing is let's do everything we can to be successful. And if I may, Chair, just to clarify, maybe before the motion is voted on, council is looking for clarity around the grant information for their decision making. What are some of the options? What are some of the scope of the grant? Because there will be some limiting factors, such as if we put a fire hall in there, that certainly wouldn't be qualifying as part of the grant. I think what I'm hearing as well is what will it take to be successful, and that might help in our phasing. I also heard that let's reach out to Squamish Nation and maybe some support there would create some greater chance of being successful in this grant. Have I summed up expectations?
I think so, and I would certainly expect that when you kind of get to the fine points of the grant, that it would come back to council, particularly if there's a participation requirement, because we would have to budget for that. Clearly.
Correct.
So, and have a good sense of what that is. Further comment?
Can I get clarification?
Yeah.
And I don't remember the details of this particular grant, but I thought there was something, if you were a community under a certain size, they were actually covering up to all of it, or
5,000.
Yeah, it's a relatively small number, I think.
Oh, it's an actual number, not a percentage?
Population.
It's population.
And it's under 5, but it was all of it under 5,000, or it's like 90%.
That was my recollection.
Yeah, it was quite extensive, but usually these grants are, you know, our municipal contribution 25 or 20%, so it's either 80, 75 from other orders of government. And I think this one is in that line too. I don't think it's matching, as Councillor Chappell was saying.
No, it's
I don't want to be held to it at this point. My understanding is that it's approximately 35 from each level of government.
Yeah, exactly, so 30, 30, 30.
Yeah.
We'll get that information before we actually have to make the decision. Further comment? We'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Dawson.
Thank you. Good job.
Thank you.
Everybody okay? We want to fine?
5 minutes break.
5 minutes break. Recess for 5 minutes. Thank you. We're back in session, and we're going to 4.3 Community Amenity Contribution Policy. Mr. Buxton.
Thank you, Chair, Council. Gary Buxton, General Manager, Natasha Golbeck, Senior Director, and Jonas Velanishkis, Director of Community Planning. Hopefully today we can lead you through a reasonable discussion on the Community Amenity Contribution Policy, which, sort of going back to first principles, is it's a non-statutory part of work that we do. It's not referenced in the Local Government Act or the Community Charter. Its intention is to help us cover the costs of growth associated with growth, but not covered by statutory charges such as development cost charges. And we negotiate these with development applicants, rezoning applicants during the rezoning process. The intent when we got into this initially was to focus on a couple of particular issues, those being affordable housing and critical amenities, which are in many cases underfunded or unfunded priorities that we have, and to replace the interim guidelines which have a number of sort of diffuse areas from affordable housing through various on-site amenities to public art, to childcare facilities. So we're trying to focus it down onto a couple of particular areas. It's been a council priority for a while to get this done. So starting from our guidelines in December 2015 through to October 2017, this committee, February of this year with this committee, and May of this year in a council meeting. Since that time, we've been working on a review of the policy that's got it to where it is today. We've been engaging with the public in a limited way through the website, but more with industry representatives. The essence of the policy, or where it's at right now, is that the small rezonings of under 50 units essentially are asked to negotiate a cash in lieu payment of about $15 a square foot, up from the current $6 in the interim guidelines. The larger rezonings, again, it's the cash in lieu payment of $15 per square foot, or that they physically provide 10% of the 10% of the units as affordable housing units. The monies are directed by council, not the developer. In the past, we've had developers that make contributions and direct them to certain things, but here the monies would be directed by council to affordable housing or critical facilities. The rationale that underlies it is we've got limited resources, land and financial, for affordable housing, and limited expertise, and the development industry has those in abundance. The intent is to leverage new development to address issues related to growth, produce a share of development as affordable housing, or help fund through cash in lieu those critical amenities. I just want to place it, the provision of units in terms of its place in sort of a larger affordable housing strategy, and this isn't our strategy, this is our thinking on a strategy. We don't have a formal housing strategy, but towards the left we have the shelter and subsidised more emergent forms of housing. We have facilitation support and enabling policy. On the ownership part of the spectrum, on the right hand side again, we have advocacy, action and enabling policy. So where the CAC sit is really sort of increasing the supply of the missing middle, the modest market. So it's a short to medium term opportunity to obtain units in a fairly easy way through development projects. So it's part of a larger housing strategy or approach. The other financial contributions that the policy discusses are $1 per square foot for active transportation, or 50 cents for parks amenities, or an equivalent in terms of physical construction. So again, there is an option for a developer to physically provide these, physically construct them, and again, those amounts give a rough cash equivalency so that we have an understanding of what we expect in terms of physical construction, and again, to address growth needs.
And that would be for off-site construction we're talking about?
That's correct, yeah. So, the objectives that we're seeking to address, other than affordable housing and critical amenities, in terms of, from a staff point of view, we need some clarity, certainty and ease of administration. If we're negotiating with developers through zoning applications, we need some good guidance and direction on how we're going to evaluate any amenity contribution offers from developers. In the absence of a policy, it's difficult for us to review, and it's very difficult for us to make any sort of recommendation to council about what's on the table. In terms of policy discretion, because it is a policy, you as council have the option to follow it or vary it as you deem appropriate. You're not bound by the policy. So you have the discretion to, if it's compliance you want, that's great. If you think that there's more than compliance that can be negotiated, that's an option too. This just provides some guidelines and some direction for staff in dealing with this issue. In terms of comparisons to where the $15 per square foot, this is based on some research that you've seen before. This isn't new. So the 15 per square foot based on a 1,200 square foot unit doesn't put us at the highest and doesn't put us at the lowest. I mean, there's a very unusual range of numbers here. North Vancouver obviously have rates that are very much higher. Their land values are very different. But in terms of the others, we're not the lowest and not the highest.
Can I just stop you right there, Councillor Chabelle? Just a question of clarification, Councillor Park?
No, I'll speak.
So the North Vancouver basically is selling air, like they're selling this. Is that why you think they got the 140?
I don't know how they can get to a number that large. I suspect it's because if it's Lonsdale, the land values are way higher.
Because of the density allowed.
The land value and the FAR, those you've seen those developments as much as I have in Lonsdale. They're very significant developments on very expensive pieces of dirt.
Okay, go ahead.
There's an option if council was uncertain about that, about those amounts, particularly the 15. There's an option we can offer to a two-tier system, which is a relatively easy change to the policy. And that's to essentially for the larger projects, the 50 plus units. The proposal would be 10% of the units, or $15 plus the additional 6. So it's more cumulative. So it would be 10% plus 6 or 15 plus 6, essentially $21. So if council was of the opinion that you wanted to increase that 15, I would suggest let's go with something like this as an alternative. It's a relatively simple change to that policy. In the staff report, I talked to 3 different sort of methodologies that we've discussed in certain forms when we've gone through this policy before. One of them is the land lift or pro forma, which deals with an appraisal of land pre and post development. I'll go through that. There's a percentage of sales value or profit, and then a DCC model approach. Just in terms of the pro forma approach, try and give you a brief overview of how it works. I mean, this graphic shows the basic elements of what needs to be understood or known in part or in whole. So land values, before and after, construction costs, current market value. Some of the information's available, readily available. Some is not known and may not be available, may not be made available by the developer. We may not know it. We may have to make best estimates. We may need to make assumptions about gross buildable area, floor area ratios. We may need to estimate rents with respect to commercial and residential spaces, depending on the sort of application that we're dealing with. And we may have to make assumptions about operating expenses and capitalisation reports or expected rate of return. Again, it's information we may or may not have. We may have to make estimates of construction costs and finance costs and interest on construction loans. Again, information we may have, information we may not have. And you can see it's getting progressively more complex. We may have to make assumptions on sales prices. So based on those estimates and assumptions and the data you can get and what you can't get, you may be able to establish an approximate return to the developer and a value for the project. We have been here before. I've discovered these spreadsheets in our on our computer. They can get very complex, and they're all dependent on the information that you can get, the estimates and assumptions that you make. It's complex. It takes substantial time, resources, and expertise to do this, and they may not get an agreement between the parties in the end. So it may take a long time, and you may, at the end of the day, be literally no further ahead than where you were at the start. A number of municipalities have moved away from it because of the time and effort that's required and the complexity, and the fact that at the end of the day you just end up arguing about the numbers that you've got to. Moving back to the percentage of sales or profit, it's a derivative of the pro forma model and essentially subject to the same problems and limitations with respect to data, assumptions, complexity. And it also becomes close to a sales tax, which takes us into areas of provincial approval that we're not authorised to be in. So it's legislatively trickier to deal with. The DCC model approach, that's frankly probably the preferred approach, where we can identify all the projects and cost them, and then we can assign those costs on a per square foot or per square metre basis or a unit basis, just like we do with the DCC model. We know how many water, sewer, roads, projects, and we can assign that. There's clear rationale, you get a clear outcome. Some communities have moved to this. At this point in time, trying to do that is a very significant piece of work, and we need to put some resources and time aside to do that.
No?
Just on that one.
Go ahead.
It seems quite daunting. Do we have the start of that analysis through our facilities and real estate master plan or not?
Yes, and I think with the next step that we have in that, the costing model and the funding, that would get us a lot closer to being able to do this. So I think the next time when we review this, we get to the point of approving this policy, I'd say the next time that's what we should be aiming for with the next iteration of the CAC policy. We're just not there yet.
Let me just, on that point, so that would be like having kind of a shopping list, which we would just periodically update from time to time, depending on what came through the door, and what the needs were that the council assessed. So, because this is policy, not bylaw, you can add to it with a simple resolution, or take away, or direct staff slightly in a different direction, but you need to be armed with a conversation with the developer.
Yes.
And does it matter particularly to the developer where the amenities might be going, or is that really just a matter for this table?
I think the development, I shouldn't speak for the development industry, but I think they would want what's being funded to be related to growth. But what they really seek is clarity and certainty. Is if it's going to be X, then they can budget X. If they don't know if it's going to be X, Y, or Z, then they get very uncomfortable, as you can see in their correspondence. So.
But just on that point, so the clarity they need is what it costs them.
Yes.
What we do with the money is practically irrelevant to them, unless it's going to directly affect their development. And if we have a shopping list from time to time, and for the first year of the next council term, it might be this, and then priorities change, and we might add a few things, take away a few things, so you know at any given time when somebody walks through a door with an application or a negotiation starts, what council is looking for, some contribution to these things. Would it be as simple as that? I mean, the DCC is quite complicated. I mean, that's a complicated calculation, and I'm not sure that anybody's suggesting we go into that kind of a thing, but really this is kind of for our internal purposes, of just having a list from time to time that we want filled.
Well, I think what I'm suggesting the DCC model approach is quite similar to the DCC model. There is a fairly robust selection of projects that council wants to fund through growth. Those are costed to a reasonable degree, and then those are assigned against the development that's, quote, remaining. So the work really is putting that funding model together. And I've seen the DCC model. It's a very complex set of spreadsheets. This wouldn't need to be like that, but it would be relatively complex. Hence, it would take some time to put together, which I'm suggesting would be, that's the future, the target for us, I think, with the next go-around on it.
Yeah, just on the DCC model, I get the logic in it, because it's very clear, transparent, directed at growth. DCCs in and of themselves are a complicated thing, and those bylaws are complicated. So I guess in the future it would be good, I get sort of having a list of these big capital facilities projects, figuring out the numbers and figuring out how do we start to generate the money needed to get those things, and we've done a lot of that work. But at the same time, not creating such an onerous system that the DCC processes, and that you have some nimbleness to make sure you're incorporating things that you haven't thought of. I just worry about putting all this time into a DCC approach and it just actually becoming too onerous and too complicated. So I think there's a fine, happy balance in there, but.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the provincial policy that came out. Was there a recommendation that the CACs are somehow more or less associated with the particular development, or can they completely be unrelated?
I think they can be, everything is, I guess you could argue that everything is related to development because it's growth. And so whatever happens inside the community will benefit that development. But I don't think the province has specified that it needs to be specific to that development.
Maybe just one recollection. Okay. Anything else? Sorry.
Are we just discussing?
Well, it's just
what I'd like
a
to hear at the end.
clarification. This is not the end.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
this
This
is
is
just
just on the
end of
DCC
Yeah.
approach.
5 more slides. So
Yeah.
in terms of particular changes to the policy that you've seen since May, I think, there are some wording changes with respect to the beginning of section 1. And I think those are tracked. You can see them in the around clarity. There's a reference to a provision, a percentage of floor space rather than a percentage of units. That adds some flexibility for particular applications. I've eliminated reference to the provision of employee and staff accommodation for small rezoning applications. That, in retrospect, that would never really have functioned. We've deleted one whole part of the larger rezonings because it was essentially a duplication of, there were 2 sections that were essentially duplication, so we've just eliminated one. With respect to rental housing rezonings, the rates in both parts of the table, small and larger applications, are smaller than the for sale housing. I think $3 per square foot and 5% for physical provision, so substantially or half in terms of. But I think I just would like to confirm that given the need for rental housing, whether or not that does remain in, or whether we want to exclude rental housing, albeit market rental housing, from CACs to encourage their provision. That's one of the options. There's a simple addition to section 11 to add market rental housing after the word proposed, if council wanted to do that. Currently, the policy doesn't exclude market rental housing, it just has it at a much lower rate. We had that discussion last time, and I'll leave that for council's discussion. Section 3, there's an inclusion of a unit amount to define a major new residential project. Council have asked for that to be removed, but I think that just gives us some clarity as to where that issue kicks in, stops and starts. There's a deletion of section 9. That was the provision of residential units for smaller applications. That potentially resulted in 1 or 2 units scattered here, there, and everywhere across the district. Logistically, it would be just very difficult to administer. So I think it would be better to go with cash and lieu. If folks still want to propose that, they can do that. Section 11 is just clarified to indicate that we wouldn't charge CACs for non-market or affordable housing. Because in some projects you're going to have, there may be a bit of both, and we would only charge the CACs or levy the CACs on the market portions. You've seen the industry comments in their letter that's attached as part of our engagement. We addressed some of the issues, some changes have been made. There is a suggestion about grandfathering and timing or implementation. Frankly, we've been sort of using this off the side of our desk now for probably the best part of a year. So I don't see the need to delay this any further. The secondary suites with respect to single family units, that mixes lots and gross floor area, and it creates an apples and oranges comparison that doesn't work. And with respect to the inflationary adjustments, we're going to be talking about up nickels and dimes, and I'm not quite sure how I would inflationary adjust to 10%. So at some point we have 10.21 housing units. I think because we're going to be looking at this at least every second year, that I don't think we need to go there. However, having said that, some final comments did come in, and I would recommend that we add sort of a codicil to the last part of section part 1, table 1, section 1, table 1, to deal with the gross floor area, just to indicate that it would be based on the maximum gross floor area allowed by proposed rezoning. It's simply a clarification. Section 8, if we do actually get into the pro forma, if we choose to do that, the last thing is that if we have a peer review, then that would make that available to the applicant. And then finally, sections 14 and 18 said two different things. Said would review it on a 2-year basis or a 3-year basis, so I'm simply proposing that we remove section 14 and go with section 18. So those don't alter the substance of the policy. So in summary, we're trying to focus this on our unfunded or underfunded priorities. We're looking for some clarity and ease of administration to provide staff some negotiation guidance, and so we can make recommendations. Council is still going to make all the decisions. You're not bound by this policy. You can use it as you deem appropriate. The recommendation is to adopt the draft policy. I think it's really adopt the draft policy with a few minor amendments, particularly the ones that I've suggested just in the previous slide, and I would like Council to sort of put their mind one last time back to the rental housing, or send it back to us with further direction and refinements.
Okay, so in a perfect world, we would start off with questions. So if you start making comments now, I'm going to frown at you and consider you imperfect. So,
And cut you off to someone who's going to ask a question?
Councillor Chappelle, Councillor Pryor, Councillor Elliott, and Mayor Heintzman.
Thanks. Well, you frown all the time anyways.
Oh,
Used to that. I love the zoning for dollars community amenity conversation. It's a great one. And I think you've done an amazing job at the policy. I really like it. But I'm wondering about Whistler's affordable housing policy. Do they have 10% or 15% affordable housing requests going into with the housing authority up there?
I must admit, I don't know.
I think most of the housing that is currently being zoned for is all-employee housing in Whistler. So I think the percentages are much higher there because the needs are different.
Okay, I would say, but on that piece, 10% seems low, and I don't know what to compare that to. So it's our need, and we have this one time without market-oriented transparency to be able to create this policy. So in comparison to other communities, is it taking in units at 10%, or is it at, where in other communities are we in the list of that?
I know when I spoke to council in February, I provided that it's, again, neither the highest nor the lowest. I've seen 50% in San Francisco.
50?
5-0 in some of their rezoning applications. 5% is not uncommon, 10% is not uncommon, 15% is not uncommon.
Can I ask for clarification? Are we talking about purpose-built market rental, or are we
No,
talking about
affordable housing.
subsidized affordable?
Subsidized affordable
rental?
housing.
It would be affordable housing of, because these, yeah,
I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
some of them, I've seen policies, I've written policies for for sale units at 5%. I've seen all sorts. It's not, again, it's not the highest, it's not the lowest.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Pryor, then Councillor Elliott, or Heintzman, and I'll put myself on
Maybe
this.
we should put employing housing on the list as well. But my question is so the performer methodology is still there, right? We still have that?
Yes, the policy still retains the option for employee or staff accommodation with the larger applications. There's still a reference to it, so it's still there. And the second question was,
Well, I was just saying, no, to Sue's point on employee housing, it's probably a good idea to put that in there because I certainly hear a lot about employee housing now. If we've got affordable housing, we should write in employee housing too.
I'm sorry, the second question, Councillor, was employee housing and...
Well, and the pro forma,
It's still there as an option should you choose to use it.
yeah, because on a lot of the, we go from a lot that's zoned for 50 units and rezone it to 200 units. There's a big land lift there. And sometimes what happens is the guy gets a rezoning and sells the land. So where does the profit go? So on those kind of things, that's why I think that reform is so important. I can list 2 or 3 where they rezoned and sold. So I think that's a good tool for those kind of things.
Councillor Elliott.
We talk about CACs being for affordable housing and critical facilities.
Yep.
Is childcare written as one of those facilities?
I don't believe it is. Critical amenities, it's a non-market housing project with capital facilities to accommodate municipal operations and programming, such as Brennan Park and Uni Hall. Other capital facilities priorities may be included if identified by master plan, or as otherwise directed by council.
I would like to ask council's permission to include childcare in there. That we don't have enough spaces yet. We are growing quickly. You just have to look at the numbers at Brennan Park to know there's lots of kids here. And I still think we're in a crisis regarding childcare. So I would like council to think about maybe adding that to the list of critical facilities. So not mandating it, but at least keeping it there. And I think it becomes more important, especially in greenfield applications. With regard to market rental, I know we talked about whether it should provide CACs the last time we talked about this. But we also talked about that even if you build market rental, it does have an impact on the community. So one of the things I was thinking is that is to leave the CAC contribution there, but because they go in the priority line, purpose-built rental, right? It's prioritized.
Correct.
That saves them time and money. And also, I think right now we're just asking for 5% of affordable rental in those. I think if they increase that amount, they decrease their CAC amount. So if they want to provide 10% or 15% of affordable rental within their purpose-built rental building, that could decrease their CAC contribution as well. So I think that we leave it in there, but there's ways that they can pull that number down, and they already save time and money by being first in line through our development priorities. So I think we do have to acknowledge that even market rental does produce an impact in terms of growth. We shouldn't get rid of it altogether.
Mayor, myself, Councillor Sproul.
I think adding daycare, just to address that, we're not prescribing it, it's just an option for council in the future. There may be other things we want to include in there, no problem with daycare. If there's no need, council doesn't have to direct funds there. If there is a need, it's in there, we don't have to go outside the policy. I do want to have a good conversation with council about what our expectation is outside of the community amendment contributions, the growth, the reacting to growth piece. What's a baseline expectation in a rezoning for market rental, purpose-built rental, and for affordable purpose-built rental in particular? Like a baseline. And I think that's sort of where you were going to, is like if we're going to start with a baseline of 5%, that's just to get your application in the door. That's not a CAC. That's just the price of doing business in a town that's as bustling as ours. There's a cost to that growth. And so I think if it's somehow an affordable rental, maybe you don't have to pay for that cost of growth, but if it's a market rental, you should pay for it unless you're going above and beyond our policy. So I think we'd like to figure out what that baseline is. Right now we've been doing that 5%. I don't think it's enough. And in fact, we have applications that come in with none. So I think we want to create that baseline, and it's not a CAC, it's the price of doing business. It gets a little bit complicated when you have subsidy rates that go with the person. So for example, you can have a market apartment, but there's a senior that has a safer rate, and they get a subsidy. They're living in a market apartment, but they have the subsidy. The subsidy follows the individual and doesn't follow the building. That's what Laura Beaudry said last week. So even when you get purpose-built rental, you are creating an opportunity for that to actually be subsidized through the individual subsidy that goes with that person. And a lot of our subsidy rates go with the family or the person, not with the building. So it gets a little bit complicated. If you're, if you're building, I'm kind of talking in circles, I'm trying to sort of get my thoughts out. If you're building purpose-built rental, period, and you're trying to target a certain income, the subsidy often follows the person, right? Not the building. So I think we should create an expectation. If you're over 50 units, you have a baseline purpose-built rental. 10%, 20%, whatever we want to say that to be. Anything above and beyond that, and you pay amenities on that, maybe it's a lesser rate. I think that's sort of where we're going with this. Anything above that, maybe you start to be able to not have to pay the CAC on, but you don't get your CAC waived because of that. There's still a cost for that growth, as Councillor Elliott said. I don't think we're setting that baseline expectation appropriately. I think we can ask for that baseline. And then I think generally speaking, the CAC policy is pretty good. We're happy to discuss some of the choices you're outlining, but I think we're not creating that baseline expectation, and we're actually including that too much in a CAC. And maybe I'm reading that wrong, but they all had their hands up.
Yeah, no, so I'll go to Jonas to respond.
Okay, so just wanted to clarify that we do have now a baseline for market rental. Any new rezoning of a larger size that comes in, we ask them to target 10% market rental and 10% affordable housing rental.
That's on a development that's otherwise for sale?
Yes. So a good example would be the Back West site. They're proposing 18 affordable housing units, which is above their 10%, and 12 market rental units, which is just below their 10%. We've asked them to shift more units into the affordable side. So there's a bunch of rezonings that are going through now that that have come in back in 2016, and so those are working through the system, but the new rezonings should be targeting 10% and 10%.
Okay.
We've had some that have come with none, though.
So myself, Councillor Chappelle, Councillor Pryor. So could you go back to the slide that has the options on it?
I mean,
the
it's
over
a
50 and
negotiation.
under 50? That one. So I was looking at this and I found this intriguing in the report that because the question I had the last time this came to us was if you allow whatever the number is, to be entirely taken away by just the provision of affordable rental units. And affordable rental units is, the way that works, as I understand it at least, if you say it's 80% rental revenue, then the price that a developer would sell that for to an investor would be more or less 80% of market. So the developer takes a hit there. But does that equal what they're saving if they just paid cash? Is there any kind of relationship between the two numbers? And so I'm wondering if, when I look at that plus thing, I start thinking that that might be an interesting way of dealing with that possibility. But did we ever get any kind of monetization of that 80% or whatever that number is? Do we have any idea whether that relates to $6 a foot? Is the developer still, $20 a foot ahead or something?
We're into that pro forma process that I demonstrated. It would depend on the project.
Very project specific. Then.
Yeah. So it's not easy to get to that number.
Okay. That's Phil.
Thanks. I think $15 is too low. I think that we need to, I totally agree about the rental housing, but I think 15% is more reasonable for a community that has a limited land base and has to densify. So we have to densify with smaller projects now because we're out of land. We are a different land base than Lonsdale or any other area, and we are in a bigger crisis because of our constrictions with land. So, having $15 maybe just going, and because it's going into affordable housing is a great asset for, but we need more. We can't build anything and we have no land to build on. So we're now going to have to acquire land and build. So we have to look at what it's going to cost us to achieve goals of what density is costing us. So we need arts facilities. We need our assets paid for. We have a lot of needs in this community that haven't been saved for. And if we don't take it in through densification, then this is zoning for dollars. Basically, people are asking us to change our land use, and we have to take in the right amenities up front and have a request. We can go down and up if people show benefit. But if we don't set our standards high right up front, we will never achieve the goals that we have set for our community. And I really feel like the spreadsheet that you showed is excellent. I think that having a market-based pro forma transparency is not unreasonable to ask for when people come to us and ask us to change our land use. Because yes, housing is great and we need all spectrum of the housing, but unless we start taking in enormous amounts of units, we will never even make a dent. 10 units here, 10 units there with our land base will never achieve our goals. So understanding what the end goal is, which, we've got bits and pieces, we've got a real estate strategy, but understanding, we need an arts facility, we need park space, we need all these amenities that make us a livable community. But right now, I just see housing in here. I don't see, housing and active transportation. So moving people around from house to house without any other amenities. There's no economic development incentives. There's no, and daycare spaces, we have policy that allows daycare in every single house in Squamish. So if somebody wants to open a daycare, we have nothing in our policy that prevents us from opening a daycare. What prevents people from having daycare is the living wage that they don't receive from the province, which is not our concern. But we've opened up our policy and allowed daycare everywhere. So I don't want to put daycare in an amenity contribution, because if we have daycare spaces opening and we can't staff them, that's more of an issue. But all the other things that we need to make our community livable, transportation, active transportation, we are in great need, and you can see by how many candidates are running because we're not taking in enough. And this is our chance to actually do that. And we can negotiate down and say, you know what, immense benefit, more great looking project, providing something different, providing food, space. There's a lot of different things that developers can bring to the table. But if we don't set this policy with an expectation for our land, we're gonna lose out, and we're gonna lose out long-term.
So what's your suggestion?
I just said, more than $15 a square foot. I want to see the policy go up from 10% to 15%. I am totally in agreement that rental can be incentivized. And maybe rental stays at 15%, but everything else goes up to $15, but everything else goes up to $20. And that sort of puts us in between, because you can't compare us to Lower Mainland or areas that have a lot of land, because our needs are gonna, because we don't have any district land to use, our future amenity contributions have to be looking forward and saying we have to now take in land for hospitals. We have to take in land for all the other needs in our community. So
I
more.
think there's going to be some decision points here. And so I was trying to get through the questions and then we'll get into these decision points and try and identify them. So I have Councillor Pryor, Councillor Elliott.
Yeah,
Mayor Heintzman.
you know, the purpose-built rentals, I mean, I'm glad to see them in there, but I'm suspicious of them because most people building 50 or more units, they don't mind having purpose-built rentals in there because they always planned on it and they're getting a benefit from us, but they always planned on having them there anyway. And the affordable rentals, that one's always kind of bugged me because I don't know who manages that. You know, we don't manage it. So the guy says, okay, I'll put in 10 affordable rentals. They're supposed to be 80% of, the guy next door is $1,000 a month, so this one's $800 a month. That's affordable. And then when the town does get inundated with a lot of these units that are being built, and we get the next 2,000 built, the rent might drop. So does the affordable rents drop, or does anybody manage that, or?
Just on that point, who does manage it?
So it would be, managed by privately, whoever who owns the building or the set of units. The district would monitor, there would have to be annual reporting to the district on eligibility and rental rates.
Yeah.
The 80%, so right, and what we've done recently is we've asked bigger developments, we've tried to delay entering into a housing agreement if we know they're not at building permit stage yet, because what we need is a housing policy which is going to outline exactly what's affordable. Right now it's a bit of a gray area. But generally there's an affordability criteria based on somebody's income, and then as a second test, what we do in the housing agreements is put in no matter what the income level is, the rent cannot be more than 80% of the market rate. And so if the market rate dropped, then the affordable rate would also drop.
That'll make a lot of happy people.
Councillor.
Okay, so a couple of things to clarify. We talk about this list of critical facilities, but then none of this money is earmarked to those critical facilities.
Now, the way that the policy is worded is that, where are we? This is the section I can never find, and I can never find it. There's a section here that dictates, well, funds collected, it's on 12A. All funds collected to this policy are to be placed in the Community Amenity Provision Fund or the Affordable Housing Reserve as applicable. So council makes that decision. So critical amenities, that fund, we can develop that fund. I believe that fund exists. Does it exist now?
We put it straight to either the affordable or the one just sits back in the provision.
So it would go into one of those funds, and then council can direct those funds out of those reserves as you see fit.
Okay, so for each one, we're always deciding where the cash portion is going.
Correct, yes.
Okay. And then, Jonas, you mentioned that we're already trying to, that we have a baseline now of 10% market, 10% affordable. But then why wouldn't we reflect that in this CAC policy for those that are proposing 50 or more dwelling units? Because right now it says a minimum of 10% are provided as affordable. So is that on,
Well, it's because it was never, the reason why we kept it out was that it's not seen as an amenity. It's a rezoning consideration, just like childcare is also becoming a rezoning consideration in a lot of projects.
Okay, so if I come to you with my rezoning and I've got 10% market rental, 10% affordable rental, then I look at the CAC policy and it says a minimum of 10% has to be affordable. Is that on top of what I'm already offering? Or have I already just met a CAC? So I think that's where Mayor Heintzman was trying to understand what's the baseline and then what are we asking on top of that?
Okay, so, yes.
This may actually come into the next conversation that we're going to have, which is around the rental rezoning provisions in the Act. If we want to make that an expectation, a rezoning expectation, that would better reside as OCP policy and...
It's already OCP policy.
Yeah.
So yeah, the baseline is 10% for market rental, and the affordable rental baseline would be in the CAC policy.
Oh, we already have policy elsewhere to address that.
So is that the baseline you're talking about? So we're still putting the baseline for affordable into the CAC policy. But the market rental is sitting outside that in OCP policy, right?
Yes.
Yes.
That was my question, if the baselines were high enough or not.
So we have this and the OCP that sort of are pushing the same agenda, so to speak, around rental housing and affordable housing. They're working in concert.
So I have Mayor Heintzman, but now I'm confused, and I just want to clarify this. So if somebody walks through the door with an application for 100 units, and 10% of them are affordable housing, and we call that the baseline, and they still have to pay the $15 a foot for the whole balance of the development. They don't, because that 10% may be the baseline, but it is also the CAC, clears out the CACs. I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, and so I think that's what Mayor Heintzman was trying to get at is that high enough?
Well,
Does that cancel out?
exactly.
And I'm not sure that it is.
I don't think so.
Okay, so that's a decision point, we'll talk about that. Mayor Heintzman.
Yeah, I just, so we had that conversation about whether we do $15 or $18 last time around. We landed on 15, and I think I was of mind maybe not to 18. However, I just want to clarify, so it's 15 per square foot plus $1.50, so it's actually $16.50 a square foot in total for the CAC. And similarly, if you're doing a larger development, it's actually $22.50 a square foot. Correct? With the plus $6 or
That's the second option, yes.
That's an option.
That's an option.
We'd have to decide today.
To be honest, yeah,
Oh, I see the 10% for was or 15, but it's, the way maybe I'm reading this wrong, so one option is 10% units affordable housing, as is proposed in the policy. Option 2 is $15 a square foot plus $150 like above, plus an additional $6, an additional $150. Essentially you're adding, so it's $22.50 for anything above 50 units, or 10% affordable housing.
actually the way that I'd intended this was it's 10% plus $6 or 15 plus $6.
That's where I read it.
Oh,
So plus could go on the both
okay,
points.
that's helpful, but still, either way, anything over 50, it's actually $22.50 a square foot.
Yeah, I
Or
hadn't
option
intended that last line with the 6 plus 150. I hadn't intended for that additional 150 to be on there, but
Okay, it's essentially $6. So it's,
Yeah.
but that's what I'm saying. So it's 15 plus 6 plus 150 is $22.50. Did I get that right? Yeah. So it's
Yes.
$22.50 right now is the square foot. It's broken down into $15 pot and a $150 and a $6 pot if you're above 550 units. Sorry, 50 units. I just wanted to clarify it because I'm not. Councillor Chappelle, you suggesting we go up to $21 a square foot plus $6 plus $1.50?
Well, that's the decision point, so let's
Yeah.
leave that
Well, no,
question.
I just wasn't clear what Councillor Sparrow was trying
I'm
to say.
suggesting that we need to take in 15 units of 15% of units as affordable housing and then
Okay, that you
either,
hadn't mentioned before, but
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
fine with that.
So let me just put a little order into this chaos.
and
Try to settle on some decision points and let me know if I've missed some. So one is with respect to rental housing, charge or not, and if so, how much? Second is childcare, which is probably the simplest one. Third is, do we go a pro forma route and require pro forma? We'll try to go down that road. Next is the percentage for rental. And is it 10% for rental, purpose-built
Affordable.
rental? Affordable rental? Okay. So the percentage for affordable rental, and then the second part of that, is that somehow, there's a baseline, does that baseline amount offset any part of the CACs, or is it only above that? So that's sort of two decisions in one. The next is $15 a square foot, $6 a square foot, or some other number. And then that baseline 10% CAC. So is there anything, can staff help me? Is there anything else I might have missed there?
Only there were the three sort of administrative corrections.
Oh, those ones, okay. Let's leave those out for a minute, we'll come back to those.
Okay, so let's just try to break it down into decision-making points that you're trying to do. Thank you, Chair. I'll just maybe comment on the performer one. I think there may be the odd circumstance where council wants to do an independent performer. I don't think we get one from the developer because we will not see what we want to see. But there may be the odd case, and so maybe it's worth just having a mention it at council's discretion, a performer-based evaluation for CAC may be asked for.
One at a time. So dealing with the pro forma issue, any other comment with respect to that, Councilor Brown?
The pro forma is part of the toolbox, right?
Yes, I think actually section 8 covers that.
It's already in there.
Yeah, I actually think there is an option for the pro forma to be, and it's outlined under section 8. So
And any time there's a big property left, the pro forma, in my opinion, should be used so that when the rezoning goes through, you get some cash on the property left. And then if the project gets sold, we made some money.
Jonas?
Just want to clarify, I think what we're proposing is that the pro forma tool we utilize, as Mayor Heintzman said, when and if needed.
Yeah.
And that in, maybe not the most, but a lot of cases, we would just determine what's the per square foot cost and stick to that as a beginning of negotiation.
Further comment on that? Is that the way the policy reads now?
yes.
So we don't have to make a decision on that, okay? Childcare, let me get the easy one up. Can you add childcare to this?
Doesn't mean it's prescribed, it just means if council
Absolutely
at some
understood.
point
No,
decides.
it's just in front of us.
I thought the list was changeable at any time.
We're going to change it right now.
No, but this is entirely up to council. And we can change this list anytime. If some good idea comes in, we can add it to the list, right?
Absolutely.
Or we can take the money, not even tell anybody, and put it somewhere, right?
Well, I think you tell the public.
Well, I'm just saying that adding daycare, we're not doing anything except putting a word. We can put as many words in there as we
It's
want.
more of a communication strategy
yeah.
with the development community.
what is our legislative ability, how can we run daycares?
Run them?
Yeah, like
Different
if we're
issue. We're not
creating
talking about
spaces, if we're creating spaces for daycares and what,
We're not going there today.
so what exactly, when you say daycare, what does it mean?
Can I clarify?
Clarify.
Go ahead.
So that means the developer builds the space and then it gets leased to a childcare provider, and that space is protected in perpetuity as childcare space. We don't run them, we have nothing to do with them, we just make sure it gets built,
It's an option.
You're
It's
probably
an option.
zoned that way.
and then it gets zoned that way. But we don't touch it, we just make sure it gets built, I think
So-
that's our job.
Gets added to the list, and strike that one up. Rental housing, do we charge for that purpose-built market rental?
I'd say yes.
And if so, how much? So what the policy states is $3 a foot, if I'm not mistaken. Comments, Mayor?
I would say there, anything above and beyond what our minimum amount, so if our minimum amount is 10 or 15 and they want to give 20, I think there should be a process whereby we evaluate that against the CAC policy, but baseline expectation is this and they pay X, 15%, 10%, we'll figure that out in the next conversation, and they pay X amount per square foot for that. So there is a CAC for rental. Maybe different, it's less than the normal, but there still is a cost of growth of rental.
What's the 10% part? What do you,
That is, any development application that comes in, there's an expectation that 10% of the units are purpose-built rental.
right. And would they pay an amenity on that?
Yes,
Yeah, so.
at a different rate than a normal.
Right, and right now it's proposed at $3 a foot. So that was my question actually when we started, and there's a number of different facets to that, and I'll come to you. What happens if they go above, and is there some way to offset other costs? So I'll just leave you with that for a second, Councillor Lott.
Okay, so right now the policy is saying that if you build purpose-built rental, a minimum of 5% of the principal units have to be provided on-site as affordable housing. And then you make a 50 cent per square foot multifamily residential GFA for agri transportation, 25 cents per square foot for parks and amenities. Or you pay $3 per square foot. I think that in the first part, where when you have the and, that minimum should be 10, not 5.
Per percent of units is rental.
Yep, and then the $3 is fine. Plus 50 cents plus the 25 cents.
I think Mayor Heintzman brought up an interesting point that if we were going to stick to the, we're going to charge something for the market rental, that there maybe could be an incentive for no charge if you go above that 10%. And that, I think that would further incentivize, in a small way, more than just the minimum target.
Sure. But it should be 10, not 5.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I think, well, it's a policy, it's not a bylaw, so for me, as I was trying to say, I think, for example, if they went 100% rental, market rental, what would they pay? Charging $3 a foot throughout, or nothing? Do they offset? And so if you come back and now it's only 50%, do they get just half the offset? Or where do you start, how do you slide the scale? So I maybe don't answer that right now, but I think maybe that's something we might want to consider, is what if they just go above some of the targets? What kind of credit do they get for that?
I was looking forward to the answer to that. That's the question.
Okay, well, if there's answers here, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that it should be, there needs to be higher than $3 a square foot. And I do agree that market needs to be incentivized for market rentals, but you're still adding density to an area, and we still have to take in money for density, because this is
growth, not density.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm kind of inclined myself to, the $1.50 for parks and active transportation to me is a given for almost anything except submarket housing. And would be for any rental unit, and there's just no offset for that. And so for my mind, the question is the $3 a foot on top of that, when do we charge it and what do we charge it against? And whether the $3 is the right number or is that high or low. My personal thought is that's probably okay because it is sort of aligned with our strategy. So I'd be happy to try to incentivize it by having it considerably less.
Yeah, just on that, I think it needs to be considerably less than what a normal freehold, privately sold entity would be, so that you're creating, you need some distance between, can't push that number up too high because it crashes up against the other number and then we're not actually, I think we want some things to get more than just the bare minimum expectation.
So let me break that down then. So how do people feel about the $1.50 regardless?
It's only 75 cents as proposed right now.
Oh.
I look at it.
Oh, that's the sale one. I beg your pardon.
Yeah, I like $1.50 too.
Yeah, that was the sale one. It's for sale, market sales.
This, section 7 is purpose-built rental residential.
For rental, yeah. The one that's up on the screen was the sales, yeah, you're right. So for rental, 75 cents, for sales, $1.50. Thoughts on that? Leave it as is?
Mind that.
We'll leave it as is, no change. So $3 a foot?
I would propose $5 still separates it quite a bit from market, and isn't that much more, but brings in enough. Because if we do have to pay for parks or anything else, or the parks and transit is a low amount, but any other community amenities that have to be paid for density and adding density in an area, because you could have a 8-story rental building, or we have a 12-story market rental building. Can you imagine the low amenities and the amount of density that is being put in that area if we have these massive rental projects going?
That's where the performer kicks in.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm wondering if we want to have, I'm just spitballing here a little bit, but a 5% at the bare minimum, anything above and beyond that, we go to that sliding scale, and maybe $3 is the sliding scale. So you're going to do 10%. This is for market purpose-built rental. You'd pay $5 a square foot, according to policy. If you go above 10%,
Affordable.
No, just
No,
market.
market
Just
rental.
yeah.
we're talking about market rental.
We're talking about a purpose-built rental residential?
Yes, we're talking about number 7. That it be that it be, which is currently proposed at $3 a square foot. Maybe it's $5 for 10%.
First 10% is $5?
And they have 5%, but I'm suggesting 10%. And then everything above that is 3%. Like if you do 15, then that extra 5 is $3.
Thoughts on that? Okay.
So
So,
I'm actually unclear what council is actually doing here, so.
trying to decide some of these issues.
Yeah, well, I've got Jonas actually getting the OCP policy, which will take him way longer than he should.
So go to number 7.
Yeah.
Purpose-built rental residential, a minimum of 5%.
Mm-hmm.
I think what I'm hearing from council is 10%.
Okay.
Provision, blah, 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 I won't get into that one, but then it says, or B, $3 per square foot. I think what we're suggesting is that's $5 a square foot. And if a developer proposes 15% purpose-built rental, market rental, or 20%, that additional piece goes down to $3 a square foot.
So we're leaving the 75 cents the same. It's $5 a square foot for the first 10%. Beyond that, it's $3 a square foot.
That makes sense.
Yeah, what I need to do is make sure that that 10% is actually in the OCP, which is why he's not coming back, is he?
No, it's run away.
He's basically abandoned, he's abandoned. I mean, I know where my OCP is, I can get it faster.
We can leave that and we'll come back to that.
Okay.
I'll just find my,
And we're spitballing here, so I'm expecting it to come back and say this is
here we are.
the repercussion of that.
Okay. So what's the policy say?
So we don't have a policy that says specifically 10%. We have policies that talk about an appropriate housing mix, but we've been interpreting that as 10% on recent rezonings. I still think that if we're gonna capture the specific percentage, it probably should be in the OCP and not in the CAC policy, because it's not a CAC.
Well,
Shouldn't
let
be
me
a
push
zoning
back on that
bylaw?
because
Should
what
be
we're
the
talking
zoning
about here
bylaw?
is just amenities.
Yes.
So a zoning requirement is maybe a different thing. And it's the zoning requirement or the policy around that that will say it's going to be 10% purpose-built rental. All we're doing is putting a price on it.
Yes, yeah, so,
So this discussion is just putting a price on it.
Exactly, yeah.
And I appreciate it. I mean, you may have to take some other steps. I'll leave that to you to consider. So what we just decided, I think, is for the first 10% of a market project, the first 10% affordable rental,
Just rental.
I beg your pardon, rental, market rental, is $5 a foot plus the 150, plus the 75 cents, I beg your pardon. Above that, for market rental, if they went to say 20 or 30%, would be at $3 a foot plus the 75 cents to the rest of the building, wherever it goes. So that's where we've kind of settled. And I guess if you need other policy to ensure that actually unfolds that way, I'll leave that with you. So all we're talking about here is the amenity contribution fund. So just help me out. Do you want resolutions on these points, or do you want to take notes? And
I'm okay that, I'm gonna have to bring this back.
okay, so we'll just take notes at this point. Council's good in that. We'll move on.
Yep.
Okay.
Were there other pieces?
Percentage for affordable rental, which is actually percentage for affordable rental is another deal point I've got.
I think we've just covered that.
That was market rental.
That was section 7. We're talking about section 5 now. 5, 6, right? For 50 or more dwelling units?
So I think I'm going back to that slide that I had up there before with the options, where if you put 10% affordable rental, it took care of all of your CAC issues on a market sale development. And so I think the question is that the right percentage? I think that came out of the discussion. Or the other option is say, yes, that's the thing, but we also want some cash out of it. So you go from the 10% plus the 6% or whatever the number is. So.
Yeah, this is where I've always had a bit of trouble trying to get my brain around this, because let's take, for example, oh no, that's on tonight's agenda. Let's take, for example, a hypothetical development that is giving, that there's a requirement to build affordable rental into it. There will be a subsidy that goes back to the owner of that from the provincial government, attached to the individuals. Like you have to have it, you basically have to be a subsidized individual to go into that apartment building. Apartment, is that correct?
No.
So, but there's, mind you, there's two types of that. So this is where it's like, okay, I'll let you respond to that and then I'll coalesce my thoughts.
There are a variety of ways that units can be subsidized. Some are attached to the individual and some are attached to the unit, and the subsidy doesn't actually come through the individual, it comes through the builder.
The developer, okay. So we're talking about purpose-built affordable rental that essentially the landowner is subsidizing over the time frame of the housing agreement.
That's right.
And they put a price tag on that per year, and then they usually subtract that from what their community amenity contribution should be, and then they pay the difference.
And the only thing I'll add to that is that, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, if the individual moving into a unit that is not designated affordable brings a subsidy with them, that would then not be included in the building's affordable housing.
That would just
unit
reduce
count.
their rent.
That would just reduce their rent as an
Okay.
individual, that's right.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilor Pryor.
Timeline on this rental housing, is it 20 years or 30 years?
Perpetuity.
Life of the building,
We
70
were doing
years.
60 years
Oh,
for
I heard
this
someone
there,
say
and then we moved
timeline,
on
so I
to
thought
perpetuity.
So I don't know how that, because there's two aspects to that. I mean, I understood it to mean that if we say it's affordable housing, and we're going to figure out what the percentage is. I've heard numbers around 80%, for example. It doesn't matter where the tenant gets that 80% from, whether it comes from subsidy or pure income. The amount going to the developer's cost of that is still at 20%. Is that 20% ever taken away or reduced?
Perpetuity.
No, but, so, because what we're charging is a developer. And what we're allowing the developer credit on is the deduction in income that the developer has to incur for sub-market rental. And that's the thing, that's the reason we're giving them credit. So we're not concerned, I don't think, about the tenant and where the tenant might get his or her money from. It may be just from working, or it may be from some other income source, subsidy or whatever. But we don't care about that, because the amount going to the developer is always going to be 20% less than what the market would bear. So does it matter? I don't think
Well, it could be
does.
less. The 80% is the maximum that they
Yeah.
can charge. But
If that's the number we decide is the number.
it could be lower than that.
So what we're saying to the developer is you get a credit based on you taking the 20% hit on this. But that's really, and I think that's the only decision. isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So then the question is, 10% have to be, or 15%, or what it is? And it gets to the point then, if you're over 50 units, you have to provide 10 or 15% of those units as sub-market housing to avoid paying any cash. And we'll come back to the $6 a foot, but under the basic top two bullet points, it would be 10 or 15%.
Just a question, how does density factor into this? So is there a certain amount, you know, like, with density bonusing that we say that 15%, there's no, it's just basically flat project, whatever the project is presented, we demand 15% or 10%, whatever the number is, it's decided on? And density bonusing doesn't enter into any of this?
Well, density bonusing would be relevant if we were pre-zoning something, but in this case, we'll be negotiating case by case.
Right.
Yeah.
So the more density you get, the more units you have to build.
Yeah.
So I'd say 15%, and then we, you know, depending on the project, you can negotiate down the road, because it's not, as you say, it's not a policy, it's a recommendation.
Anybody else have thoughts on this?
Sounds
Yeah, I personally like the 10% plus the $6, because I'd like to get some cash out of these things regardless, just because we have other needs apart from all affordable housing. And I think we've reflected that in other aspects of our policy. So I personally prefer the mix, but that's my thought.
Thanks, I appreciate that, but I'd say 15% plus, you know, go down from the $6 to reflect 15% affordable units, because you're never going to be able to build units. And having the units is what's really important to our community, and then plus a contribution to other assets, like $4 instead of $6 maybe.
I think you're talking about two different things.
In the plus, 10% of units in affordable plus.
So right
But
now,
the plus is on
I
the
would-
market ones.
It can be whatever we decide it to be, so it can be added on to 15% or affordable units as well.
oh,
I think you're talking about two different things.
yeah, so just, well,
Only in the 50 plus units.
yeah, we're not talking about under 50. So right now, the policy is 10% is affordable housing, or they pay cash $15 plus a $1.50. That's the present draft.
Yeah.
So they can, if they put the 10% up, and there's no cash.
There could be cash.
Well, that's my point.
That's.
So we have two options in the discussion so far. One is we go from 10 to 15% and then there's no cash. Or we stay at 10% plus the $6, the bottom part.
Or we do 15% and ask for $4 per square foot for other amenities.
Well, you could dice that up a lot of different ways. I
Yeah.
guess.
And that is charged on the market stuff,
Yeah.
not on the affordable units.
The
That's
$6 would be charged on the market.
On the
I'm not
market,
charging
exactly.
anything for the affordable.
That's exactly,
Yeah. What the affordable does
not pay
is get rid
21.
of the $15.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Anybody else want to chime in on this before we have a fight here?
No, I think we're all agreeing.
Well, no, I don't think we are. That's my point. So I just be interested in other people's opinions.
No, Susan wants it higher on the percentage and a lower on the $6. That's what Susan's proposing. 15%?
Well, we could
Plus $4.
or whatever, I'm totally flexible on that amount.
Yeah, I think this is a policy, right? So if people are giving above and beyond that 10%, obviously you would negotiate that other, like this is a negotiation point, not a written in stone. This is a starting point. So if you go up to 15, within this policy, you can go down to 4.
Yep.
That's part of the conversation. Am I getting this wrong, or that's essential? So we're all agreeing, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
No, but I want to start at a higher percentage of affordable units. I want to
Okay, a
start
baseline
at 50.
harder?
Baseline, 50, harder baseline. And, you know, we can leave 6 in or make that a negotiating point, but I think that our deficit requires more upfront.
Councilor Carter, you saw it for me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I mean,
Is it-
what gets me about this is, let's just say you've got a 1,000 square foot unit. And so the guy's building it and he's going to say, okay, I'm going to make 10,000 square foot units that are affordable. So I have to pay, I don't have to pay anything on them, but everyone after that, I have to pay $6,000. So $6,000 or $15,000, which is better, having a rental unit or paying $15,000 over the lifetime of a building, over 50 years of renting that thing out? I mean, I've never seen any of the developers come in bitching about the 10%. I mean, everyone goes, well, I'm building 100 units, I want 10% rentals. I mean, I'm leaving them to my kids. That's what I'm going to keep when I build this building, so no problem. And I've struggled with this the whole time. I mean, I think it's, I just don't understand the numbers and how the guy building them feels about it. I know for us, we throw around numbers like, oh, we'll go 10%, well, let's go 15. And on the other side of the coin, there's the guy building them. How much is it costing him to build them? How much is this really costing him over the lifetime of the building? You know what I mean? I mean, what's it costing the guy? He goes, yeah, okay, oh, 10, oh, 15, yeah, I'll do 15%. Oh, look, I don't pay any CACs. Perfect. I was going to keep 15% for myself. And so I don't understand. I mean, I know we're struggling to get the housing. I never could figure out that, their side of the picture.
And the letter from UDIs, they were not uncomfortable. I mean, they probably don't like it a great deal, but they were not uncomfortable with the numbers where they're at.
Yeah. They're not uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I know.
It makes
That's
them a
my
little bit.
point.
So just to be clear, the 10% affordable housing isn't a baseline, it's an option.
Yes.
That takes out all the CACs.
No, it is that plus $6 as it's currently written.
No,
No,
Yeah,
that's
it's
an
an
option.
so we haven't decided on the $6 yet.
Oh, well, I just made an assumption we were going there.
Well, that's why
So-
that's what Doug was asking.
Yeah,
Plus the $6.
I made the assumption that that council is agreeable to the plus, whether that is 6 or 4 or whatever. But it's not a baseline. Councilor Chappelle's a baseline. It's not a baseline, it's an option. You either do 10% affordable housing or you pay X amount per square footage. And we have a plus now.
And then there's a plus.
And then there's a plus now.
Yeah.
So if we put that up to 15%, it will change the equation between the options. Can't just up the 15% without going, is $15 enough, right? And the other thing we want to think about is sort of touching on, I think where Ted was going is at 15%, does that then make people, does that help the developer make the decision, yeah, I want to do 15%? Or will we find them not providing the like we'll actually discourage the affordable housing? We go too high up on that percentage and we don't get it. I just don't know the answer to that. If we put that percentage up too high, particularly relative to the cash quotient, you may actually discourage people from providing the purpose-built housing, which is, we sort of want, if we're weighing the scale, we want them to provide the housing more than we want the cash today, right? You see what I'm trying to get at? So it's not just throwing out numbers, it's a balancing act we're talking about to actually get to where we want to get to.
I would at 15%, I would share your concern that we're probably likely going to see just cash contributions.
Yeah, that's my
This
concern.
is a big jump for developers to dedicate 10% of their units. Essentially, they forego a lot of revenue on those. At 15%, I would be concerned we might just see cash.
That's the point I was trying to make.
Yeah, because I'll go to you in a second, because that's what I was kind of mulling in my mind. Took a $500,000 unit that only gets 80% of the revenue. Theoretically, that would drop the price 10, 20%. Now it's a $400,000 unit. So it's $100,000 a unit hit. Why wouldn't they rather just pay $15,000 for a 1,000 square foot unit? Or $22,000 rather than take the $100,000 hit? So we do have to be careful about this. This is not
Exactly.
arbitrary at all.
I agree it's not arbitrary, but we set community amenity contributions for the developers so they understand what our community needs are and what is required to build in our community. And you don't have to have an OR. You can just say, our requirement for CACs is 15% affordable housing. If that's what we're trying to get, instead of making cash contributions, and there is arguments that cash contributions go nowhere, they go into policy or consultants, or they haven't gotten as much. So we can match there are projects like Buckley, and if we had more land, I would be amenable to more cash contributions. But right now, we have developers buying up large lots, and we're not getting the amount of affordable housing we need. So you could have it be a baseline of 15%. And having a cash contribution as well as that, like a plus cash contribution and not an or contribution. So then you're still taking in affordable housing. There is no or, there's just a plus of $4, but I say that would be, that's where we have to adjust.
Okay, so I'm going to want to wrap this up because there's other things to do today. So I'll go to the mayor, and then we're going to go around the table and have a straw vote.
Yeah, I think the OR is important. We just had, how many millions of dollars of rec center stuff just 5 minutes ago? Well, I guess about an hour and a half ago now, but we have fire halls. We've got cash issues. Our facility strategy outlines a significant investment need over the next 20 years. So I think the OR should be in there, predominantly for council's discretion more than anything. If we really are at a point where we think we need more purpose-built rental, and this is where I think we get in almost into the minutia, like this is a starting point for negotiation. That we have the OR in there, we set the expectation of, and maybe 15%, and I think this might take a little bit more analysis to see we're not actually discouraging that. Or maybe it's 10% of units at $6 and 15% at $4. I don't know, we're splitting hairs a little bit, but I think you want to be able to have that cash option, particularly if we've got some grant funding and we need matching, like, I think you want that option open for council in the future to be able to take in cash when you need cash, be able to take in affordable units when you need affordable units. Right now, definitely we need more affordable units, we know that. But there could be a circumstance, and it could be a combination of, right? Okay. This is a starting point for negotiation.
Okay, we've all talked about enough. So the first deal point is 10% or 15%. Mayor Heintzman.
I think I'm leaning towards 10% because I think 15 will actually discourage affordable units.
Councillor Spell.
We don't know that, and we can start at 15 because that's our need right now. And it can be, or we can change that number so that that discourages cash contribution, or you can mix that up, but we need more than 10%.
So you're at 15.
Yeah. I'm at 12. I can go to 12, I'm just saying we need more. If you think 15 is too much, then go to 12, but 10 is not enough.
Councillor Lillooet.
I'm going to stay at 10 with the knowledge that this is a negotiation. And we think that the development is big enough and we can get more out of it, plus the $6, or reduce the $6. So I think it gives me comfort that staff has some leeway to negotiate depending on the project and where it is. If it's quite far away from walkability, then I don't really want lots of affordable units. I think affordable units should be built close to services and transit. So for me, it depends on where the development is going. So I'm comfortable with that, and we'll just keep our eye on it.
That's correct.
Yeah, I don't mind the 10%, but it's the 10% plus.
Yeah. We'll talk about the plus in a second, so starting off with 10%.
Well, I mean, I'm relying on staff's comments saying that they feel that 15% might scare it off, so I'm going with staff.
Okay.
10%.
And I'm at 10. So we'll start off at 10. Okay? Second point is, do we leave it at 15 or do we add $6 to it, the bottom, in effect, the bottom line?
My inclination is adding the plus, and I think that's where we have the negotiation room. So, and that's plus to both the 10%. So if a developer wants to give 15%, that $6 is where we can negotiate. Maybe it's only $2 or $3 if they're adding 18%. But that's where we have the flexibility.
Okay, so just to be clear, so we're saying it's 10% plus $6 or it's $22 plus the 150. 6 and 15, 17, I beg your pardon.
21.
$21 plus the 150. The 150 is a constant. So, Councillor Spell?
The whole idea of 12 kilometers and affordable units being, we have a growth boundary, and I just find that maintaining, it's not two numbers. Starting off high, the whole idea that you're going to negotiate up is not appropriate. You start negotiations high, not low, and hope for the best. Start negotiations high, and if somebody comes in and says, I can't afford it, and here's why.
So do you want the $6?
So you're advocating for the $6?
I'm advocating for the $6, but I want to go back to that
We're not going back to
10%.
that.
But on the negotiation
Councillor Breyer?
part, yeah, I mean, I like the $6 too, but
Okay.
you go through a big rezone and you got a property that's good for 50 units coming in for 200 units, and it's got to be rezoned up. And then this comes to council and we say, there's no bloody way we're going to give this guy 150 units for that.
Okay.
Can't we say that?
Yes.
So that's perfect.
Yeah.
Like if so
The
something.
band and the expectation.
Councillor Elliott is also $6?
Yeah.
So, add the 6.
I'm clear, thank you.
Okay. The last. This baseline CAC issue that the mayor initially brought up. So if we say in a rezoning,
Baseline purpose-built rental.
yeah, come in the door, when you walk in, when you think about that, what we've done, purpose-built rental, I beg your pardon, not affordable housing,
Yeah.
market rental. We say 10% market rental. So what does that do to CACs, if any? It apparently would lower CAC to whatever it was, $3 a foot plus the 150 for that 10%.
For those units, yeah.
Okay. And above that, I beg your pardon, we wanted to go to 5 for that.
Yeah.
That was the issue. Sorry, I misstated the issue. So for that 10%, the discussion was $5 a square foot, plus the 150, plus the 75 cents. I'm sorry. Above that, for purpose-built market rental, $3 a square foot, plus the 75 cents. Is anybody in council going in a different direction now?
I mean, it's peanuts.
Okay, so you're going in that direction? So, no, it's a policy purpose. So we justify this because this satisfies policy objectives. Are we there?
Yep.
Okay. Anything else we've missed?
You better Jonas is going to be able to explain that to me.
I will.
Okay.
Oh, we don't need an engineer, we need a planner.
Okay, is there anything else? We've gone quite over time in this, but...
The only other ones, council, were those 3
I beg your
administrative. I would consider them administrative.
pardon. Yeah. Does anybody have an issue with those?
No.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to suggest that I bring this back on the 23rd then. So,
Sure. She'll still be the mayor then.
That's my last day.
A better way to spend it.
thank you.
Could be all.
Okay.
Thanks.
Rental housing zoning discussion.
Sure.
So we have 2 more items in the SLRD regional transit. And we have 20 minutes, maybe a little bit more.
Why don't we do the regional transit one first, because I think that should be a 2-minute conversation.
Okay, take it away.
We're just getting all the member municipalities in the SLRD to approve a motion, essentially, it's on the agenda, giving Minister Trevina and Minister James sort of the heads up that we're expecting them to implement a motor fuel tax in the area to pay for regional transit. So you can see the resolution, and Karen's going to move it, or do you have a question? Question? Go ahead.
Go ahead.
How did we settle on the motor fuel tax rather than other forms of funding like the carbon tax?
We haven't.
We haven't 100%. I think this is a bit of we are looking to move this forward quickly in this year based on our conversation with Minister Trevina at UBCM, and that we expect the provincial government to figure out a system to pay for it. They're in charge of the carbon tax. They're still looking at that as a possible way to fund this. In the meantime, we want to get the engine running and say, look, we need you to be looking at a motor fuel tax.
And being at the same meeting, I'll add that very point was raised by a couple of directors who also wanted to be able to have this flexible enough to consider things such as carbon tax or other provincial contributions. And that's why we spent a little time, but in order to assist with the funding is the guts of the motion.
Yeah.
And it leaves open those possibilities which have not yet been set.
And the amount and...
But we have to get, the reason for this was we want to get them thinking that we are unanimous in the thought that some way there's going to be a motor fuel tax.
Or some way we're going to get regional transit funded through a mechanism.
Yeah.
And they need to start moving their bureaucracies to help get us there.
So.
And this is a step in.
Yeah, this is a step we have to take regardless of where it's spent or what happens. We have to actually move forward with getting our gas tax funding.
So there's two recommended motions. One is that, and the other is funding.
Oh, yeah, so why don't we move the first one? I'll move it.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Councillor Elliott.
Yeah.
Mr. Buxton?
Sorry, I did get an email from Whistler last week suggesting that they've spoken to the ministry, and the ministry is suggesting that up to a 5 cent per litre be included. I don't know if that was...
We took that out at the SLRD.
Yeah.
We didn't want to confine it to that. That certainly can be part of the conversation we have with them. We didn't want to restrict it in the motion.
Yeah, exactly right. Maybe higher or lower. We just don't know yet.
Yeah, we know
That's why I
that.
said up, that it needs up to.
No.
Okay, fine.
We had that discussion, so that's still out there.
I think there's power, if I may, Chair. I think we want to be, this is the motion the SRD has approved. This is the motion Whistler and Pemberton will consider. There's still so much of the minutiae that need to be decided on. This is not deciding on anything, but we need to be consistent in exactly what our motion is to the minister at this point. So us adding things at this point, I think actually would set us back.
Yeah, so this is just writing a letter.
Yep.
Asking for gas tax.
This is for them to start the motions of actually
We're supporting.
doing what they need to do to get it done.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Moved, seconded. I'll call the question on the first one. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously?
On the
Go ahead and second.
Sure, on the second motion, this sort of came out of the discussion with Minister Trevina as well about if we really want to hit this timeline of September 2019 or fall 2019 to get this up and running, that we need to collectively put some effort and money into this. Originally, we were sort of thinking maybe, a little bit from Squamish, a little bit from Whistler, pull it. We actually have a cost center at the regional district for regional transit. There's $71,000 sitting there. So instead of just pulling out of a dedicated to regional transit initiative. So the thought here is that we support it coming out of that cost center. We all pay into that cost center. So, and then it doesn't necessarily come out of our individual budgets at this point. It comes out of the SLRB cost center, and we can get going on this. So do we need to just sanction that? I think it's the SLRD technically who is, well, maybe we request that the SLRD utilize $50,000. I mean, we've already approved this at the SLRD board, so it's a little redundant,
Yeah, but I think what they're looking for is just a supporting resolution.
Yeah, so I'll move that.
Okay. Second, Councillor Elliott, further discussion? Call the question, all in
Wait,
favor?
hang on, I'm looking at this motion and it's really, it's very specific, asking for $50,000 from the $71,000
Yeah, so,
infrastructure servicing, and then the rest of it to engage someone or an entity to further work with the system, and then so that will in its entirely pay for a consultant to work on the scope of the MOU with BC Transit to figure out infrastructure and the full cost of everything?
this is SLRD money,
Yeah.
and we're
No,
just
I got
supporting
that.
and spending.
Yeah, the thought from all of this, and Carrie might want to speak to this specifically, is that unless we have someone dedicated to moving this ball along, we will not meet the timelines to get this done by a year from now, basically. And in order to do that, getting someone specifically tasked on it is important. That takes a little bit of money because we don't have the capacity in our staff. SLRD doesn't have the capacity. Whistler doesn't have the capacity. We're all busy. Let's focus in on someone who's going to drive this and get it done. So that's what this is about.
Absolutely.
Further comment? Call the question, all in favor? Opposed? Carries unanimously. And back to rental housing zoning discussion.
Sure. So as we all know, the province has come out with an actual rental zone. So I wanted council to consider a few things. One is we have maybe 3 buildings in the whole, 3 complexes in the district that are currently purpose-built rental. So consider zoning those rental, so they stay that way in perpetuity. So we don't have redevelopment of those sites and those people being evicted. So one, I think we want to bring that back. Won't get back in this term, but ASAP, and in the meantime, we don't consider those types of applications that are coming forward. So there's that piece. The other piece is within our zoning bylaw, we may want to set out specific percentages and actually have those zoned rental in any of these new applications that come forward, so that 10%, if that is it, or if it's 30% purpose-built rental, that within that zone, it's actually prescribed, it's actually zoned for that. It's not just a covenant, it's not just that this, it's zoned for that. And actually layering that zoning opportunity within those zones. And I don't know if we can do that retroactively about these things that we've already negotiated, purpose-built rental. But we should look at that, and as well as we should obviously, anything into the future, we need to have the bylaw that reflects that ability. And then I think the other conversation is what are the bare minimum expectations on market purpose-built rental for developments below and above 50 units?
Jonas.
Really good ideas, and we've already included the zoning existing purpose-built rental buildings into the zoning bylaw update, so that's going to be coming forward in 2019. In terms of including it not only with a housing agreement but also in the zone, I think that's a valid point, and we can start doing that going forward because the rights are there now. I don't think we need to go back and retroactively rezone the properties that have been recently zoned or are in the rezoning process, because we've already secured those through a housing agreement. So I think it would be just an added layer of protection, but I think the level of protection that we're getting through the covenants, is there's going to be penalties associated with not following those agreements, and the district is going to have to actively monitor, as it would have to if there was a zoning provision. So in terms of enforcement, whether it's covenant or zoning bylaw, I don't think it makes it any easier either way.
Your eyes and then.
Yeah, one more, and sorry, I had one more thing to add. And we've done this a little bit already when we looked at where we were looking to potential lands where we would want to put purpose-built rental, but I think, and there was some discussion in our meetings with ministers and such, that we strategically look at specific Crown grant pieces and put a list together and make a request to the Crown for those pieces for purpose-built rental. And there may be pieces of municipal property we want to zone rental to, but I think there's more of a comprehensive, but I think we want to get our list of a couple Crown Grant pieces in pretty soon to make that request that we get those to deliver purpose-built rental.
Councilor Park?
So on the rental ones, say the guy's building a 100-plex, so he's gonna have 10 rental units. My company says, well, okay, I'll buy a couple of those units. So company A goes in and buys 2 of those units to rent out.
No, there's one owner for all those units. They're not individually stratified. They're one strata for those 10 units.
So there's
One
some
owner.
blocks off.
That's what we insist on.
That's what we insist on, is we try to limit the number of owners. And I think we've explored ideas where it could be broken down by floors. So the whole floor has to be owned by one owner. We don't want to have to monitor multiple, especially when it comes down to, let's say, I want to buy one rental unit. Monitoring who's in there, whether it's my brother, it gets very complicated. So we try and limit the number of owners to the whole building, and if that's not possible, then we go down to the floor.
They're not stratified.
So it'll be 10, so on 50 units, you've got 5 rentals owned by one entity.
Yes.
One title.
Councilor Spell, Councilor Elliott, and I put myself on the list.
Having rental units that can be purchased by individuals like the Whistler Housing Authority would offer more for workers and other, actually having companies be able to buy individual units is important. I think that is very limiting. You can't have an entire floor of one company, and when you have a housing authority, those units are managed and can be rented out by, like if you have a housing authority, they can manage individually owned units. So I don't know what the purpose, I think it's really limiting that way of going about things, or maybe I'm misunderstanding something.
You want to respond to that, Joe?
Sure. There's nothing to prevent, let's say, if an employer was interested in renting a bunch of units.
In buying a couple of units so that they have permanent rental stock for their staff.
Yeah, so I think there's nothing limiting them in renting them and getting into an agreement with the owner that, we're going to provide you with the long-term supply of occupants, and we're going to take care of all the damage deposits and all that. There's nothing to prevent that. It would be preventative if somebody wanted to just buy 2 units because of the issues with monitoring and enforcement. However, I think if there was a legitimate proposal, we would always entertain that, and there would be a process by which you could then stratify a couple of those units, provided council approves the stratification.
So,
But I follow up with
no,
that.
I think I'm going around the room. So, Councilor Elliott,
Previously,
myself, Mayor Heintzman, we'll come back to you.
Do we have in our policy a no net loss of rental? No?
Yes.
That's now in the OCP.
Yeah.
Okay. And as we bring forward the major zoning bylaw rewrite to align with the OCP, I think that we need to look at this new zoning around where we believe our neighborhood hubs will be and our transit lines, so that we start to pre-zone where we believe this kind of density should be. And not the whole lot, but the idea that we can make a portion of the lot rental, I think is important, that we start thinking about where we want that kind of rental density to show up in town. That's just for consideration.
Mayor Heintzman.
Just on Susan's point, if the gondola wanted to go and buy 10 units, they can go and buy 10 condos, have 10 separate titles, and if they think they need 12, buy 12, if they think they need 8, buy 8. So I don't necessarily think it's important to allow for them to buy a portion of rental units. They can get into, as Jonas said, a rental agreement to say, we'll lease these out for 5 years, these 10 units. They can get into a rental agreement, or they can go and buy whatever they want. I think you want to minimize the stratification of these rental units, because then, as Jonas says, you're just going to dilute the process, make it really complicated to monitor, and you're not going to actually achieve the result. But I think there's means to get to where Councillor Chappelle is going in terms of businesses providing rental. They just rent it themselves.
Yeah, myself and Councillor Chappelle, Councillor Pryor. So when I looked at this, it struck me that it provides another tool for flexibility, because it may be appropriate in some cases to allow the building to be stratified into individual units sold to a variety of separate investors, but we zone it, we control the zoning. And I only say that because sometimes it's easier to finance. And if we're trying to encourage this type of development, we do want to make it easy to finance. And it's easier, and I haven't done this for a long time, but it's easier to finance individual units with a bank as a whole. So if the bank had to seize it, they could sell it to 20 different investors, still for rental, but they don't have to sell it as one unit. And it sometimes just makes it easier for a bank to kind of get on board with those things. So it's, we don't have to decide that. I think Councillor Elliott's point is quite key. And I'm not sure whether it's a zoning change or even an OCP change for some areas where that's part of our vision, is we're going to look for percentages for rental in this, and when the zoning application comes along, it's not a surprise to anybody. But I'll leave that to you. But go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to respond, because we've had a number of these conversations with applicants, and they always say, it's much easier for us to finance it if it's been stratified completely. But the enforcement issue is then really an issue for us to monitor it. And from my understanding is there are different financial institutions that would go and finance a rental project than a market project. So yeah, there are financial implications, but I think it seems to me that there are avenues for those projects to pursue different financing.
Yeah. So anyways, for me, it's a tool. It's Councillor Chappelle and Councillor Pryor.
Thanks. And the idea of having one overlord for a set of rentals that manages them all, you really need to, enforcement is about policy, it's really not, and about having a structure in place that you can manage your housing, which we don't have. And yes, it's onerous if we're just a municipality without a housing structure to be able to manage units, but we're going to have to move towards having a policy to be able to enforce all our units and monitor all affordable housing and have a housing authority. And which is exactly the housing authority's job, and having one person own an entire floor over having individual units, I think is an onerous thing to ask. I think you can have both, and enforcing it is equally, is the same whether you have one or 10 owners.
You're talking about affordable rental, not purpose-built rental market.
Purpose-built rental market or affordable, like anything, managing the units.
We don't have to decide any of this today. So Councillor Pryor for the last word.
Yeah, well, you see, if a guy's building 40 units, 4 of them are going to be affordable. 4 purpose-built. So my company's going to buy those 4. I'm going to rent them to my kids. And when I die, I'm going to leave them. So I get to buy 4 units, 15-20% cheaper. There's just something in there that...
We're talking about...
Okay, anyway, when I look at the affordable stuff, I just see, I think we're going down the right path. I do like the idea of a housing authority looking after all of them.
So, can I ask a question, sir?
Sure.
We're going to get council's going to get the information about the housing authority, and I think that's where it's going, and that's what it's going to. The intention of the housing authority isn't to manage all the purpose-built rental out there. It's to manage the affordable rental out there, or the stuff that we purposely build as an authority and manage those things. But we're not necessarily, and maybe it would have a policing, it would go and maybe just make sure that this covenant is being acted on, and maybe there's an oversight piece to it, but they're not going to necessarily, unless they get contracted to manage that and rent it out to a person, they're not necessarily going to be involved in the purpose-built market rental side of it, correct?
That's correct, especially if we can limit the number of owners, because the less owners, the less oversight there will be required.
We have come to the end of our meeting. So status recommendations to council, there are none. Referrals from council.
Staff has enough clarity on what to be.
Well, I think we're starting off with the bylaw, and there's going to be a discussion around the bylaw. We'll cover off things like renter to the family, for example,
Exactly.
like Council Pryor suggested. So There's a whole bunch of issues around here. We just cut, oh, sorry, you can't do that.
We can do it.
Nice try. State planning is not that simple.
You know, the thing is,
Okay, I'll move to terminate.
All in favor? Opposed? Nobody's opposed? Perfect.
Thank you,
Very
guys.
unanimous.